Okay, we are live streaming. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council and municipal staff that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. All council meetings are also recorded. Recordings will be available to the public on the township's YouTube account. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is restricted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is held electronically under Bylaw 2020-70 to amend Procedural Bylaw 2018-117 pursuant to Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. We will start with the adoption of the agenda. And Sue, are we amending the agenda?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and could you identify the amendments for me?
Yes, I'll just put that up here. So we're asking that the agenda be amended to table fire report 8.1.3 and be brought back only at final draft and go into closed at 2 p.m. to receive information from Suzanne Hunt from Templeman.
Okay, and what about 8.1.2, the draft fireworks bylaw?
Yes, we will table that one as well.
Okay. So council, just to be aware, those two items are tabled. And with that, the recommendation is that the council and committee meeting agenda for February 2nd, 2021 be approved as amended. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. All those in favor? And that's carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest this morning?
None.
None here.
I see none. We'll move on to our delegation. This morning we have Mr. Brian Whitehead with us from JP2G Consulting, and he's here to talk to us about development charges. Welcome, Brian. It's good to see you. It's been a long time since I've seen you actually, and glad to have you here and really appreciate that you've come to speak to us about this particular topic that in our community that is starting to grow significantly, council does need to review this issue. So welcome, and please, I don't know, are we going to share screen so he can show his presentation, Gwen?
I hope so.
So do I. Not sure how that happens in the background. Gwen works that magic.
Perhaps Mayor Love would
Gwen may be between stations. She was setting up the PowerPoint as well in the council chamber for staff to see the PowerPoint. So she may just be between screens.
Brian, did you want me to share my screen or did you want to share your screen?
I think you could do it if I could just prompt you as we go along.
Okay, give me a
That's
second
okay.
here. I wasn't aware that I needed to do this, so it'll just take me a second.
This is just one of those wonderful challenges of working electronically. Although, Brian, you have to admit, I know the number of times I've done presentations, you get in the room and you've checked everything out and you start the presentation and then something doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's a given.
I do have a backup. And I could make some introductory comments while we're waiting, if you want.
Okay, that'd be great. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to make this presentation to council. I've been involved with development charges, well, since the beginning of the legislation in 1991. Prior to 1991, there was development charges being collected, but it was called lot levies. There were lot levies imposed as a condition of land severance or subdivision approval going back a long time. But then it was determined that really there should be some rules surrounding how these charges are calculated, because in the late 80s they were starting to escalate. So in 1991, the government of the day implemented the Development Charges Act, and it was amended in 97 by the Conservatives to put some restrictions on it because the charges were quite high. And then we've been using the same legislation from 97 until about last year or so. There were some additional changes that were made. I won't get into all the details of those changes, but they may come up from time to time as we're going through the presentation. So over the last 30 years, I've been working on development charges studies for most of, well, Ranford County and Lanark County has been the area that I've been working in. I've done studies for the town of Petawawa up until about 8 years ago. I did all their studies. Horton Township, McNabb Braeside, Greater Madawaska, Laurentian Valley last year. And in Lanark County, I've done Montague Township and Tay Valley Township. And some municipalities are every 5 years, and as every 5 years rolls around, it's like, holy cow, 5 years has gone by so quickly. But in Horton and McNabb Braeside and Greater Madawaska, I've done the studies ever since 1991. I think I've done, our firm's done most of them. So mostly the small rural municipalities. There's other firms out there like Watson Associates and Hemson Consulting that are the big guys in the field. When I started out in 91, I called Watson Associates to see if they would sort of partner up, and they weren't too interested. But I did look up with a fellow named Sid Morehouse Associates, and the model that we use is based on the model that they presented to us and trained us on. And for decades, I've been working with Sid, who's now retired. So I'm generally pretty familiar with the process. The presentation I'm making today is the format is generally the same as the one that I present to all municipalities when I'm presenting a development charge study. I've modified it somewhat for this presentation because it's a general orientation session. There are some numbers in it that I've inserted that would be examples to your municipality, but they're not, they're just examples. They're not numbers that are what I would call real. They're not real numbers. They're just examples for discussion purposes only. So the agenda today would be to provide council and staff, for that matter, with an explanation of the purpose of development charges studies, the methodology that we would follow in conducting the study, the municipal services that are available to a municipality, demographics, and it was mentioned that you're experiencing some growth, which is sort of a good thing in some ways, and bad in others, I suppose. And then development charges rates, service allocations, and it's the final bullet says next steps, but really it's more oriented to the process of a development charge study and implementing a development charge bylaw. Next slide, please. Normally these slides zoom in one at a time, but I'll just take my time and review each one carefully. There's some key principles that we follow when we conduct a development charges study. The first one is that development charges are intended to pay for the increase of capital costs required because of the increased need for services arising from development. Now the key, oops, now there you go. Let's see if the first one zooms in. Just click. Yeah, perfect. Oh, just hang on. So the key phrase in the first bullet is capital costs. Development charges allow a municipality to recover the growth-related capital costs of facilities and works, but not operating costs. It's strictly capital costs, and it's for the need for increased level of services arising from development. The second bullet is existing taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for the capital cost of growth. And the next one is new taxpayers should not have to contribute more than their fair share of the capital costs of municipal services for new growth. So ideally, we're looking for the right balance between existing residents having to pay their fair share and new residents paying their share as a result of the capital cost of new services for growth. Next bullet, please. The Development Charges Act requires a background study to be completed. And finally, and this is a challenging statement. The study is to determine the eligible development charges that may be collected in order to recover the growth-related net capital costs of services over a 10-year period. So I'll just explain that a little bit. It has to be growth related. So the development charges have to be for elements of services that are growth related. And it's the net capital costs, and net capital costs are net of any grants, subsidies, or donations that you might anticipate for costs. So you have to net those out of the eligible development charge. And the services are for a 10-year growth period for most services. And I should clarify that for services related to sewer and water services can be over a 20-year capital time period, but 10 years for others like fire and roads and general government and library.
Brian, can I ask you, do you want to take questions as we go, or would you prefer for us to wait till the end?
I'd be okay if there's questions now.
Okay, I just
Any
want
questions?
to check with council if there were any questions to this point. I'm not seeing any. I just wanted to, because I think I just have to go back to your previous slide, because I did have a question I was going to ask you about it.
Yeah, maybe best to do it that way, because then we might forget at the end.
Okay, when you were talking about the net capital costs, you said you were netting out any grants or donations. How does anyone figure out if there's going to be any grants or donations? So for example, if we continue to grow in Madawaska Valley and we need to build a new library, we have no way of knowing whether there would be any grants available through the process of that project. We don't know.
Yeah.
Usually we get 2 weeks notice. So I'm just curious how you handle that component of it.
That's a very good question. When we do the development charge study, we do it based on the information we know about today. So typically, where you might, roads is one category where it could be affected, or for, I guess in your case, hopefully recreation. But if you don't anticipate a grant or subsidy, and then you get one later, then you're the winner.
Well, that's
winner.
good.
You're a winner. If you can't anticipate a grant, then you can't budget for it.
Okay, so with this,
there are circumstances where municipalities anticipate road work as part of the development charge study, and then a new program comes up that people weren't aware of, and suddenly that they are eligible for, and they get the funding, then they're able to spend that money on that road and keep the development charge. You don't have to amend the bylaw. The bylaw is 5-year. It's implemented for 5 years. That's a legislated requirement. So it automatically expires after that 5-year period. So if you're updating your bylaw and you've got to add that same project on the list again, then you'd have to net out the funding if you have the funding for it.
Okay, great. Thank you. That explains that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the explanation.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? Sue, you'll have to say something because I can't see if your hand's up.
My hand is up. I did have a question, if I may, regarding the background study. So you referenced the need for a background study to get started.
Correct.
Now, there was always concern that they're expensive. Is there ever a time where the expense was never recouped from the development charges that came from that? And the other part of that question was, do you have to do the study every year? Or is it just like you do the background study, which is your main expense, and then after that it's updated and revised accordingly?
Good question. The studies are considered to be 100% growth related. So they would fit under a category of service called general government, as other studies would. And So whenever somebody pays a development charge, a portion of that, municipality would have to pay the cost of the first study up front. But as time goes on, they would be able to recover a portion of the cost of that study through future development charges that people pay when there's growth. And usually it's at the building permit stage, but I'll explain that later. And so the cost of the studies can vary quite a bit, and some of them are quite expensive when you get into the sewer and water service categories. The ones that I've been doing for rural municipalities are in the $15,000 range. The ones for 15 to 20, say, and then if it's sewer and water services, then you could be it could be another 10 to maybe even $25,000 to $30,000 range for a study. So those are just general numbers, but I know I can't speak for other firms as to what they would charge. But I can tell you is that it's 100% recoverable through the study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Brian, in relation to that, then the municipality is paying the upfront cost. So all the taxpayers would be paying the upfront costs for the initial study. When the study needs to be refreshed, is it every 5 years? Then can we draw that cost down from the funds we've acquired through the development charges?
The study is good for the 5-year life of the study. If you want to change the bylaw over the first year, you can use the results of the same study and amend your bylaw accordingly without having to go through an amendment. When I say an amendment, think of a development charge bylaw like a zoning bylaw, and it's the same procedure for notification and appeal process. Public notification, public meeting, appeal. So again, the study has to be redone after the 5 years for the next bylaw. The bylaws expire 5 years automatically. They can be indexed according to the cost of living, the cost of them. They're not the cost of the studies, the amount of the development charges. But they expire after 5 years, and you have to do a new study to implement a new bylaw. And but if in the first year of your bylaw you want to make a change, you can make that change without doing a new study.
When we would need to do a new study, could we draw the cost of that study from development charges we had collected?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. So it's one would hope then that taxpayers are bearing the initial upfront costs, but this should be something that generates sufficient revenue through the development charges to pay for the studies to refresh the development charges every 5 years. That would be the goal. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there any other questions on that then? So we can let Brian continue. Sue, are you good? Oh, wait, Councillor Wilmer.
Just continuing on the costs. So there must be a point then, if we're looking at, say, let's use 15,000 for now. Is there a point where you can look at the amount of development that we're going to experience and say it's worthwhile to do it? Because there must be a point where it's not worth doing if we have no growth, or somewhere in between where it sort of meets the criteria to fund the study and hopefully quite a bit more. Is there a point that you can see when you're doing this where it makes sense or it doesn't?
Well, municipalities have such limited sources of revenue. You've got taxation, and you've got grants and subsidies, and this is just one other way of generating revenue for capital works. Later in the presentation, I can speak to your growth specifically. What we've done is we have looked at your historical growth pattern, and like through Statistics Canada information, and it hasn't been what I would call robust. historically. In fact, your average household size and your average population has been declining over some decades, but I think you're probably seeing some change now because, well, for a couple of reasons. One is because your municipality is within that 3-hour commuting range from Toronto. And secondly, well, COVID for that matter, there's suddenly a new interest in rural Ontario that we're seeing. And I'm certainly seeing it in my business, and I'm actually seeing it in your municipality as a result of some of my very old files that are getting dusted off and getting resurrected, not just Madawaska Valley, but all over. I think we could speak to a little, once you see the numbers, you can, and short answer is, I think it is worthwhile for you to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Is there anything else, or can we let Brian carry on because he has more to impart to us? I'm not seeing any other questions, so Brian, please continue.
Thank you. Next slide, please. The methodology, and there's several factors that we look at when we develop work on a development charge background study. And first thing we do is growth forecasts. I've touched on it a little bit, and I have some examples later. We do growth forecasts for population, and we do it also for commercial and industrial development. And because there's eventually a development charge that would be established for residential by housing type and commercial by industrial or commercial categories. And under residential, you'd have most of your development charges would be single detached residential, but there'd also be a category for multiple attached, like 3-4 townhouse type units, which you wouldn't have too many of yet, perhaps, but and then apartments. And we have another category for mobile homes, but not many municipalities have a lot of mobile homes development. So we do a growth forecast, and then we develop what's called average service levels. And we would look at an inventory of your services in all the different categories. In your case, probably roads and fire would be the two of the bigger ones. Recreation, I've got library and sewer and water. And then we would look at all the components of that system. Usually the major components like rolling stock and buildings would be the main facilities, capital items. And then what we would do is we would sit down with each department head, and we would provide them with an overview like I'm doing with you today. And then we would interview them to try and find out what elements of each service that they provide have growth related components. So for example, if I'm talking to your public works supervisor and I'm explaining this to him or her, I'd start with the buildings. And so if there were, for example, a proposal to update the roads garage, or in some cases there's more than one roads garage, we could determine how many bays or how many square meters or square feet of the existing structure that is there, and what the anticipated expansion of that structure would be. So you would have an existing building, and if it was expanding from 3 bays to 5 bays or 4 bays to 5 bays, we could establish a development, an average service level based on number of bays or number of square meters or square foot. And then that service level would be compared to your population projection or your population over the previous 10 years to come up with an average service level per person of your existing fire hall, or excuse me, roads garage. And then you get X number of square feet per person, basically. And then that would be compared to the growth elements, and then you would estimate the future growth related cost based on how much expansion of that facility would be. And it's the same with the rolling stock. If you have tandem trucks and you're buying, if you've got 2 or say 3 tandem trucks, and you're replacing one tandem truck with a new tandem truck, that's not growth related. If you're replacing a single axle truck with a tandem truck, that would be growth related. Another example that is quite common is at fire departments. They have 2 tankers and a pumper, and they're replacing a tanker with a new tanker, then that's not growth related because you're just replacing one with another. But if the new tanker is a 2,000 gallon tanker and it's replacing a 1,500 gallon tanker, then 25% of it would be growth related. So we go through all the different services and identify the growth related elements in all the services, and then try and find a measurable growth. Roads is always a difficult one. Different ways of measuring growth on roads, because they're all sometimes site specific to a certain area. So how can you say, well, if I upgrade a road in one area of the municipality, down in Combermere, why should somebody in Bog Lake have to pay for it? So, but the argument there is that you would be doing a number of road improvements over all the municipality. You would look at all the road improvements and identify generally what the growth related portions of those road improvements would be. And everybody would be traveling all the roads, and there would be some of those improvements hopefully in your area. Obvious improvements would be for roads would be increasing from gravel to asphalt. Other ways of measuring increasing growth in roads is road improvements that have improvement to the overall road profile of the road, or increasing it. If the traveled surface or is being increased or widened, or ditching and culverts and the like. But we would rely on the information provided by staff to help us with calculating what those growth-related elements are. And asset management plans are also helpful in identifying the existing services and what you have available. But ultimately, we need to work with staff to come up with the growth-related elements. Typically, there's a key staff person that helps. That is our point of contact. It's either the CAO and or the treasurer. The treasurers are usually pretty good at working with this, because ultimately they'll be the ones that have to collect the money and put it in reserve funds. And I can explain that a little later. So that's how we come up with, and then the calculation is based on development type. As I mentioned before, there's residential and commercial. And what we do is we look at your overall assessment base, because your assessment will identify residential assessment, commercial, industrial, residential farm it's called usually, and commercial, various tax categories. And we look at the overall ratio between commercial industrial tax base and residential tax base. For rural municipalities, it's usually 90% residential. For municipalities with an urban component like yours, it probably would be a little higher on the commercial side. So you might be 10 or 12% commercial, as opposed to Horton Township or McNabb Braeside that might be 5 or 6% commercial. And even more urban municipalities would have a much higher commercial tax base. So that's the study approach for the most part. Is there any questions on that?
Yes, Brian. So obviously, if you were doing this 15 years ago, there wouldn't be the asset management information that we now have as municipalities available to us. And I'm just wondering if when you're quoting, when a company is quoting, do they look at what kind of information we have available? Specifically, I'm thinking that we've just recently done some significant work in water and wastewater, and we do have some projects that would be growth related that are already identified in our, I think it's probably our 20-year outlook.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how many years long it goes, but it's a good long number of years. So does that help? Does that are we able to identify when we're seeking quotes to do a development study that we have this information? We've done certain work that maybe not all municipalities have done, like we're in the throes of doing building condition assessments and things like that, that have our factors in whether or not expanding a building is even feasible, or whether you would end up having to look at a new building. So I'm just questioning, because we do now as municipalities have a lot more information that we can provide. Does that help in any way with the cost of the studies? Because obviously that's going to be one of the big concerns.
Short answer is yes. Road need studies, capital studies, with sewer and water in particular, any original environmental like study reports or information that was prepared to justify expansions, then absolutely that information would be very useful. In fact, sometimes required, especially on the sewer and water side.
Okay, so if we were to tender this project, we should identify that we do have, we have done
Absolutely.
some of this work, and okay, I just
Absolutely.
wanted to know if that was valuable in terms of what we will get back if we tender a project like this.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Brian at this point?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Sue?
So, Brian, when you were referencing your examples of the roads, gravel versus paving and what is growth related, how does road assumption play into this? So we have a road assumption bylaw, and we have many cottage private roads that they're aware what standards they need to get their roads ready before it's assumed by the municipality. But as these areas populate, we're expecting there would be more. If they meet the bylaw guidelines, we would be assuming more roads. How does that fall into growth? Or what part qualifies for the development charges?
Right. So any work that's done by the property owners to improve the road before it's assumed would not be considered growth, like part of the study. So once the road becomes part of the municipality system, then it can be assessed to determine if, in the study, to determine if there's going to be any capital, if it's on a capital works plan. So all of the growth elements wind up on what we call as a 10-year capital works plan. So if the road that's been assumed finds its way onto that capital works plan, then the elements of that work that are to improve the road would be considered growth related.
Okay, and I guess the reason I'm asking is for every road that we assume, we need another 0.25 of a truck, let's say. Hillary will always give me those, references. So that means maybe I need another truck because I have more roads, and I need another employee because now I have more roads. Does that play like a role at all?
Absolutely. It's not like we measure, how many roads you plan to assume and say that you're going to need, a new truck. It's only through any studies that you have or any discussions we have with staff that make recommendations to council. So really, when we're interviewing the staff, it's sometimes I call it the wish list. You come up with the list of capital items that you want to recommend to council over the next 10-year period for capital improvements, and ultimately it's going to be council that decides which capital improvements will get on the list.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for Brian at this point? I'm not seeing any, so, oh, wait, Councillor Poplinski, I just saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Brian, and I'm glad you mentioned the recent situation where, because of the COVID and of course, so on, and the fact that we are looking at this 3-hour distance travel from Toronto and Ottawa. So basically, we're sitting in a very, very good location for development. One of the biggest problems that I see that we have here is there's no suitable housing, or very little. We're seeing there's set records in terms of real estate in the last year. A lot of people want to come here, but many people can't find housing, and there seems to be a reluctance. And we have to then get back and say, is it our the fact that we have no land is that if there's certainly a demand for it. We know there's a lot of vacant lots sitting in the village of Barry's Bay that's not being developed. There's other property that's sitting around the area that needs to be developed, but there doesn't seem to be a plan where we can sort of to move forward on. And I agree with, it's great to talk about roads. I think we're doing a good job on roads and we're catching up, you know, and but I think the development, if we can get some more housing, residential and commercial, if there's some way of addressing this and giving it a little more perhaps importance, that I would be all in favor of doing that, because I think that's one of our problems. And the other thing was the statistics dealing with the number of people and the growth itself. I'm sure the last amount of large growth that we've had, I considered fairly large considering what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years. Will that come into play in the new statistics? I understand it's always delayed when you start looking at statistics, but it's very important because I'm meeting new people all the time that have moved here in the last 6 months. And it certainly wouldn't reflect it on your report, because your report is based on information taken from a prior time, you know? But so I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Okay, if I may, Mayor Love.
Please.
In your case, what I would suggest, what we would do is we would look at your existing vacant lot inventory. We would look at your severance history, we would look at what development proposals you have at different stages of the planning approval process, whether they're concept plans, draft approved plans, or final approved plans. So we would get a profile of your existing inventory of available lots, and by type. And then we would look at your building permit activity historically. The population model we use is based heavily on the issuance of building permits, and for commercial and residential, because that's normally at the stage where you require the service to be collected, is at the building permit stage. And that's most municipalities implement their development charge at that stage, but some, there are other options, and I'll get into that later. But and I ran into this in McNabb Braeside as well, because over the years they've increased more development pressure because of the expansion of Highway 17 in their case, close in proximity to Ottawa. So we would make certain assumptions about the future increase in growth. For example, right now, your historical building permit activity has been in the, say, 20 new houses a year, and most recently. And we'd ask staff for that information. We could make an assumption that with COVID and proximity to Toronto, that over the next 5 years, that we can anticipate a progressive increase in that number. And that number could increase from 25 to, say, over a period of 5 years, it could go from 20 to 35 or even 40. But it's an assumption. And it's an assumption based on the information we have. And we would incorporate that into the study and present it at a public meeting. And if the public didn't have any opposition to it and council can support it and it gets adopted, it comes into effect. So, but to answer your question, it's looking at your existing situation, collecting all the existing informations and making some assumptions about how the development trends are going to affect your growth pattern into the future.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Councillor Poplinski, a follow-up?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up, if I may. And just, you mentioned that an average of 20 new homes a year. What we're seeing on the statistics, certainly in the last year, the number of renovations and people moving up, buying cottages, renovating, and taking up permanent residences, I think, and our statistics will bear that out. So I'm wondering, is in that we're going to see more of. So hopefully that would be part of the statistics, and we would be able to base then what we're going to do based on a lot of that further information. So, but I think it is an area that we need to address, and because I think if we look after our housing and develop that, we're going to have a lot more people coming. So, because I think we are in a wonderful spot here. One of the other issues, and I would hopefully you can address it, is in the past it's always been a factor to, what are the neighboring townships doing in order to be competitive and having people want to come and develop here. And it always came up, well, we can't be out too far out of line because even though we may have something special to offer here, a lot of people will look at the bottom line. What is the cost of development? So is that something that we would be taking into consideration as well? What exactly our competition, and really our neighbors are our competition in that sense. So would that be something that we would want to be appraised of? Thank you.
Through the mayor, yes, absolutely. And later in the presentation, I do have some examples of what other municipalities are charging in Renfrew County that I can show you. I can also tell you that additions and expansions to existing dwellings are not eligible for development charges. And I appreciate that you have a lot of that going on. And in the case of commercial industrial, an existing commercial or industrial business would be allowed to expand up to 50% without the requirement of a development charge. But anything beyond that would be subject to a development charge, or any new commercial. And also the addition of a second dwelling unit within an existing building is also exempt under the Development Charges Act. So just those clarifications. But when it comes to your comparables and your competition, I have a slide on that.
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. So shall we continue, Brian, then?
Yes, please, Mayor Love.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Okay. I may have covered actually a bit of this already, but the actual calculation, there's that net growth related capital cost reference again. And again, net of any subsidies or grants. All the calculations in a development charge study are in terms called net present value, or today's dollars. So what that means is if you have a capital works plan with an expenditure anticipated 5 or 10 years from now, that number has to be discounted by a percentage amount each year based on anticipated inflation. So and that would keep the dollars all in current dollar values. We come up with a net capital cost per person. So whether it's a dollar value per square meter or per unit of measurement. And then we ultimately add up all the different capital costs per person for each service category. And we multiply them by an average household rate. So it's our experience that, and it's generally known that the average household size for a single detached dwelling would be greater than a multiple attached dwelling or an apartment. And in your case, a single detached dwelling might be closer to 3 people per household, whereas an apartment might be 1.5 people per household. So that affects the dollar value of a development charge per unit. And then once we come up with a development charge per person per household, that's where we have to reduce that charge by an amount equal to all the what's referred to as credits and balances. So for your first study, that won't apply because when you collect development charges, you won't have any development charge revenues in any reserve funds. So all development charges when they get collected, get put into reserve funds based on the service category that they're collected for. And if there's any balances at the time that the study is being done, then the eligible development charge has to be reduced by an amount that's included in the existing reserve fund. At the end of the day, we come up with a development charge per unit, single detached multiple attached, apartment, commercial, industrial. Any questions?
Okay, any questions at this point? I'm not seeing any, so Brian, please continue.
Next slide, please. Township services. This is a slide I created for you. These are for rural municipalities, the most typical service categories. General government includes, well, this study and any other studies. If you're updating your zoning bylaw, or you're doing a road needs study, or if you're doing a study like as Mayor Love mentioned on your sewer plant or your water plant, that's a portion of which can be attributed to growth. It would fit under this category. At one time, municipal government buildings have been considered, but that was eliminated in '97. Like I'm thinking of administration buildings were eliminated. And I've even had some municipalities get a bit creative, like municipal name signs entering your municipality. I've done that before, but it typically is one of the smaller service categories. Fire protection is pretty clear. Again, that's the capital buildings and rolling stock are the main items, but it can get as refined as bunker suits and face masks and oxygen tanks and what they call it, dry hydrants, and all emergency vehicle trucks and jaws of life. All those things are eligible for fire protection. Length of hose. I don't typically drill down to that level of detail, but you're certainly eligible to do that. Transportation, again, rolling stock and roads themselves are the two main capital items. And recreation, of course, that's probably a category that is front and center in your municipality with the Ontario Games pending. I did a little reading about that, and you're going to be confronted with some significant costs there in your recreation service category with your Paul Yakabuski Center. And any increases in the size of the building or structure or community hall or any of the facilities that you're going to be upgrading that are larger or expanded from what's there now could be eligible. Library, I threw that in. Not sure what your library situation is, but books, the library facilities themselves, equipment within the library are all eligible. And then other service categories, there's a lot of service categories under the Act. Not a lot of them are Toronto related, like the subway and transit services. And there's one here you might want to consider: waste diversion services. That's a new one, I believe. Policing services. I don't know if that's ambulance, which I think is county.
Mm-hmm.
Long-term care, which I think is county. Parks and recreation, which we've covered under recreation. Childcare, housing services. Again, I think that's county related. And just to give you a sample of a few. What this slide also shows is service areas. So a development charge can apply to an area within a municipality as well. And that's why I've included your sewer service area and your water service area. In your case, they may be the same, they may not be the same. I don't know, but they don't have to be the same. Other special service areas that I've worked with in the past include stormwater management, wherever there's a municipal drain or a municipal drain service area that you can calculate a development charge for. So any questions about the service types?
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Any questions? No, I think we're pretty good on that one. Let's continue.
Okay. This is your population historically from 2011 to 2021. And what I did was, this is an actual example. well, kind of real, but you may notice that the numbers look higher than what you would normally think that your population is. And because what we do is, what I've done here is I've taken the Statistics Canada information for 2011 and 2016. And what I've done is in Statistics Canada, they have a category for your population, then your population dwellings occupied by normal residents, and then total dwellings. So there's a difference of about 900 dwellings, and that 900 is the seasonal population. So what we do is we take the average household size of the existing dwellings based on the people that are living there year round, and then multiply that by the total dwellings in your municipality to come up with a population number that includes both seasonal and permanent residents. And the principle behind that is that even though people don't use their dwelling year round, that's their decision. A seasonal dwelling can become permanent, and a permanent dwelling can become seasonal. So they have the right to live there year round. So they also have the right to be subject to a development charge. So we just averaged the numbers between 2011 and 2016, and you will note that there is a 240 person drop in population over that time frame. There was also a decrease in the municipality's population between 2006 and 2011. And the 2021 Statistics Canada census hasn't been completed yet. It'll be done later this year, so we don't have that number. So we just made an assumption between 2016 and 2021 about growth based on building permit activity at, I believe, around 20 new units per year, multiplied by the average household size, to give you a modest increase of about 230 people between, I guess, 6633 and 6330. Any questions about that?
Brian, so if we had the 2021 census data, that would help confirm the trajectory of growth having changed from a downturn to an upswing.
Yes, but one thing I'd like to remind council is that just because you have a declining average household size doesn't mean you're not experiencing growth, because growth can be measured in building activity. What we're finding, particularly in rural Ontario historically, is that the average household size has been declining. The number of housing units remains unchanged or even increasing. But because of the average household size decrease, it results in a net decrease in the overall population. And I believe your municipality is one that's been experiencing that. So, but don't be disheartened, because you are still experiencing growth in the form of building activity.
Exactly. A lot of our growth would be seasonal population, but that still puts pressure for additional services onto the municipal government. So this, looking at population this way does help to capture some of that. Is that what I'm seeing?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So that's good to know for us, because that is a factor in what's expected by the population as our seasonal population does grow and change and fluctuate between seasonal and full-time. So it's good to know that it would capture that. Is there any questions from council or staff at this point? I'm not seeing any. So I guess we can continue, please.
Okay, so again, this is a projection that I've prepared without the benefit of doing a detailed analysis of your inventory of existing lots and development of assumptions like I talked about earlier. I just took the estimated population from the last table for the year 2021 and assumed that you would be getting an increase of 25 building permits a year over the next 10 years. And what this table does is hypothetically show you what your population growth would be if your average household size declined more slowly, and you were able to achieve 25 building new starts a year over the next 10 years. You'd have a population growth of 545 and over that time period. And conceptually, if you take that as a percentage, it would be under 10%, maybe 8% growth. But if you add up all of your capital infrastructure and identify 8% of what's potentially growth related, it can come up to a significant number.
Okay, great. Any questions from anyone on this so far? Okay, I think we're good. So let's carry on.
Yeah, these are just straight examples from other municipalities, and they have absolutely no applicability to your municipality, but what it does is give you a sense generally of what development charges are being applied in other parts of Renfrew County and Lanark County for rural municipalities for the services of roads and fire and general government and in some cases recreation and library. So if we have the average household size is blending all of them, all the different categories: single, detached, apartment, mobile home. And single detached would be higher because it would be higher than the average. And the average household size for attached and apartments and mobile homes would be less than a single detached. And in this case, we haven't calculated any tax credits or anything like that. And again, a development charge at the bottom for building space, that would be for commercial industrial. It'd be based on, say, a $5 per square meter increase, or excuse me, for new commercial or industrial, or any expansions over 50%. So it's just for giving you a sense of oh, and one other thing is, oh yeah, that'll be on the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what happens, this is an allocation of how, so somebody, let's just assume, for example, it's a single detached residential building permit, and they have to pay a $3,800 development charge. So what happens is that $3,800 gets divided up proportionally by service category and put into reserve funds. So 25% of that, or 5%, would be general eligible, the cost of the study, any other studies. And again, these percentages are just guesses. But the ratios tend to be similar to what I'm finding in other rural municipalities. Roads is always the highest. It always seems to be the highest because that's where most of the tax dollars go in rural municipalities, followed by fire protection, recreation, and then library and general government.
Okay, so you talk about dividing this up, there being these percentages for each development charge. So every $3,800 for a single family home, would 20% of it then have to be designated for recreation? Is that the idea? And 40%
Exactly.
for, okay.
Yeah.
So if there's a growth project in recreation, it can only access, say, 20%, if that was the number that was determined.
If that was the number, but if it could be much higher than 20%, depending on what capital expenditures are on your capital growth plan.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to understand the example. From this example, though, or if we had a fire protection growth related project, it could access 27.5% if this was what came back from Madawaska Valley.
Yeah, if this is what the study determined, yeah.
Okay, it's just understanding what the slide is saying. Are there any questions from council or staff on this so far? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I think we're good. Let's continue.
And then this is a follow-up to the next slide to give you a sense of the dollar value that those percentages would translate into with a $3,800 development charge based on the percentages that I mentioned. So each one of those dollar amounts would go into separate reserve funds and then be kept in those reserve funds until the project came forward on the capital works plan that they would be applied to.
Do we have to separate them physically, or can it be in one reserve fund where we have a clear understanding of the amounts for each category in it? I'm just thinking in terms of being able to potentially invest those reserve funds to earn interest. And the reason I'm asking is because obviously if you're sort of deflating from the value to get the net present value, we want to hopefully be earning interest to compensate for inflation.
Right. My understanding is, and I'm not an accountant, but my understanding is that you can have a reserve fund with sub-accounts
Okay.
for that purpose.
Okay. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so let's carry on.
And these numbers again are fictitious, but just to give you a sense of, you would also, in addition to a general charge, you could have a special service area charge. So the special service area charge would only apply to the lands that are within the service area. The general charge would apply to the entire municipality, and the sewer and water charge would be in addition to the general charge for the service area in which it applies. And the same with the commercial. So,
Okay. I don't see any questions, so let's carry forward.
in answer to an earlier question, there's your comparison. And I've added the examples for Madawaska Valley, but they're again fictitious. We just did Laurentian Valley last year. They're actually on the low side, but their general charge is $2,786, and their sewer and water is $1,845, and $420 per square meter for general, commercial, industrial, and almost $5 for sewer and water per square meter. Horton Township and McNabb Braeside, even, well, Greater Madawaska is not here, but they're all just under $4,000. And what municipalities tend to do is that they look at the eligible development charge, and if it's they look at the surrounding municipalities and they try to come in, generally either a little higher or a little lower, depending on the feeling of the council of the day. But Horton, McNabb, Braeside, and Greater Madawaska are all just under $4,000, and they're all fairly recent.
Okay.
Petawawa, maybe a bit more comparable to your situation. The general charge is $3,000, and the sewer and water is $5,525. That means somebody trying to build in the urban area of Petawawa has to pay an $8,600 development charge.
So the higher water and sewer charge there, is that driven by probably lack of capacity for those services, which would therefore mean there had to be expansion? Like, so additions to a plant or a new plant, is that driving a higher cost?
Well, it's based on the remaining capacity and averaging it out to the availability to what growth is being anticipated over the time period. And that was a unique circumstance because I guess that they share their sewer and water facilities with the military base. And so there were, I guess, if there's 100% cost, then the municipality is only entitled to collect a portion of that because the base contributed to the capital cost and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But again, it's based on calculating the net capital cost per person, per household, and growth projections for the capacity, their share of the capital cost of the growth. And in that case, it would be excess capacity. Now that's another element I should talk about, because if you have an existing plant that already has existing capacity in it, there would have to be some argument made that there was an intention to recover the growth-related costs through development charges. So that's something we'd have to clarify. You'd have to clarify with the person doing your study.
Okay. All right.
Um,
So we do have significant capacity, but it has been, as I said, we do have great documentation and work
Yeah.
that's been done that identifies specific projects that if we had growth, these would be required to continue to provide the service to a growing population. So
Correct.
I think the documentation and the work that has been done so far is going to really serve us well going forward with this kind of work. Is there any questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Sorry, everyone, you're a little tiny square, so I have to look very closely. All right, so let's carry on then.
So a consultant comes forward to council with a development charge study with rates similar to what I've shown you, and or even higher, and it's feasible that the rates could even be theoretically higher than what I've shown you. Then council is confronted with some decisions that they have to make. They can either adopt the recommended dates or rates rather. They can adopt lesser rates. The consultant's job is to identify the maximum eligible development charge. It's council's job to review that and determine what is the most appropriate rate that your community can bear for these fees. So you can adopt a lesser rate, just percentage less. Another option would be to eliminate, I've seen municipalities eliminate service categories. Or you could include defined exemptions, which isn't very common, but affordable housing, for example, might be a defined exemption, but you'd have to come up with some criteria for determining that. But those are generally, so once you get the ultimate study, these are the types of decisions that the council would have to make, and they're more political than study related. Questions?
Okay. Yeah, any questions? I don't see any. Okay, let's keep going.
So the process, this is next steps in the introduction, but once council, I guess, well, before council adopts the bylaw, there has to be a public meeting. And so just even back further than that, what the process I would normally recommend is that when staff does a draft report or is prepared by the consultant, then it would go to council for presentation purposes before it goes to the public. At that time, council could make any adjustments if they wanted, but normally we would recommend that council take the full amount to the public meeting and gauge the public response to that full recommended amount. And then after the public meeting, council could confer or discuss based on input received whether there should be any adjustments to that amount. Ultimately, there would be a bylaw prepared for consideration by council. Once it's adopted, whatever rates council includes in the bylaw, there is a 40-day appeal period, which is different than zoning. But the notice of the appeal doesn't have to be sent out until 20 days after the bylaw has been adopted by council. And similar to zoning, the bylaw comes into effect from the date it was passed by council if there's no appeals. If there's an appeal, then it would go to the local planning appeals tribunal, or formerly the Ontario Municipal Board. Questions on the process?
Any questions on that? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay. All right.
Next slide. That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. No, Brian, this has been really fantastic because it certainly provided us with a great deal of information we didn't have. Now, I know that a number of members of staff are in the council chambers, and I just want to make sure that do you have any questions from the council chambers? And if so, please ask them now.
I don't think anyone has questions. We've just been listening very intently.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm and give you guys the opportunity because I can't see you. But all right, so I don't see any other questions from council. Brian, this has been really good. Honestly, I think
Thank you.
it's answered a lot of our questions. And you know, you're a sport. You're a good sport for just taking them on the fly because you don't know what's coming at you half the time. Oh, Councillor Bromwich.
Yeah, Brian, this is a hard sell to a lot of people. Have you experienced any public meetings where there's been a bit of a backlash against the council for suggesting these charges?
That's a good question. Right at the end, Carl. You had to save it to the end, eh? Anyway, no. What I found, it's really interesting, is that because these charges get passed on to the building permit stage, then people tend to not get to, I've never had a bylaw appeal. I've never had a lot of pushback. I shouldn't say that. I did 1 year in Greater Madawaska and it was adjusted. But if it's a really high number, yeah. But sometimes, you know, like with municipalities coming in at, you know, at the 3,800 under 4,000, that seems to be like a sweet spot, if I can say that.
Is this on top of the building permit charge, 1,500, say, for
Yes.
building permit? You'd add that on? It
Yeah.
doesn't really sound like a welcoming statement for people wanting to build in your township. We're trying to
Yeah.
build a bigger tax base, and I don't know. There's a lot to think about.
The theory is that because if you implement it at the building permit stage, then that's the stage at which people would be using the services, and that people can incorporate that cost into the construction of the dwelling.
Thank you.
And it's a small overall cost to incur in the context of a new dwelling. You know, but I certainly appreciate what you're saying because I am in the development business too, and you know there are costs and they all add up.
And people would expect extra services if they pay more money, right?
Well, that's a
Just saying. I'm just saying. This is the pushback we keep getting, is that I'm paying these taxes, I'm not getting the services I deserve. This would compound that statement, and there's got to be a hard sell there, like at least appeal to these people saying it's costing us twice as much today to deliver services than it did 5 years ago. You have to understand that we're short of money, and I think that's our argument for it. But sometimes people just don't like to pay money.
I totally agree. The other interesting trend I found is that I've never seen development charges slow development down. Like it hasn't slowed Petawawa down. It hasn't slowed, you know, the places that charge the most seem to, you know, have the most growth as well.
Okay, I think one of the factors that is needed in this process is educating the public, because it's our existing taxpayers that we want to have a clear understanding that the reason you're implementing a development charge is so that they're not paying the costs of growth. So that we're at least collecting something towards those costs of growth that we're seeing in our community. So, you know, to a certain extent, it's not being imposed on existing taxpayers with property, it's being imposed on new people coming in, but they are putting pressure on our services. And we need to explain that very well so that it's clearly understood. I notice there's a hand up for admin office. Does someone have a question?
I have a question.
Please.
Brian, my question is, say this year we implemented development charges bylaws at, you know, $3,500 or whatever the fee might be. And then 5 years down the road, it's time to renew the bylaw and the study. And we've determined that we've only collected, you know, say $45,000. And our study is going to be that much or less than, or more than, sorry. how would we, and the council decides, it's not, we haven't experienced the growth that we were hoping for. How do we handle the collection of those development charges if in 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, it hasn't come to fruition the way that we hope to, and we're sitting with these funds now that we've collected from these people?
Right. If there's a shortfall in the amount you collect for general government toward the cost of a new study, then that shortfall would have to be made up by, I guess, your general levy. Short answer.
Okay, but any funds we collect for development charges could be used towards growth related projects, even if we made a determination that this wasn't a valuable exercise, like if we didn't have the growth we're anticipating, we would still be able to use the funds we collected, correct?
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely.
Okay.
But they should be used for the capital items on your capital growth plan.
Exactly.
And then that's another interesting question, because sometimes the capital growth plan changes. So for you have a road, Siberia Road listed, or maybe that's a county road, but another road listed, and then suddenly you decide to go to a different road, and you can do that as long as it is an equivalent service and the staff get a resolution from council to change the capital works plan. That's a technical thing, but
okay. All
one
right.
other
Go ahead.
comment, if I may.
Mhm.
Just getting back to Carl's question and your follow-up. One thing you might want to consider in your terms of reference for the public consultation is that one thing I've done in the past is you can have an open house, and if there are builders in your community or developers that do work in your municipality, and you wanted to invite them to a special open house session, it might be a good idea to do that on a one-on-one basis rather than dealing with them in a public meeting.
Okay. That's good to know, certainly, just because the amount of information they may want might be significantly more than what the general public is looking for. So
Exactly.
okay. Is there any other questions for Brian at this point? Sue, you've turned on your mic. Do you have a question?
No, I just, if there's no more questions, I just wanted to thank Brian for the orientation session for staff and council. I think it was very informative, and I think the next steps will be at our staff meeting to see if there's a report we can bring forth to council to see how they wish to proceed, if they wish to proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Brian. I do really appreciate this. As I say, it was, hugely important for council to get an update on some of the things that have changed since development charges were first implemented, and how they can be used to further our growth in our community. So we do really appreciate that. And
Thank you very much.
I thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Okay. All right, so at this point, where am I at? Okay, let's go on to our agenda then. Council, please, could someone let me know, can you hear the planer in the background in my house? Are you getting a whine? Okay, because yeah, I got a planer going on in the basement, and I just wanted to make certain that it wasn't coming across the microphone. All right, great. So at this point, we're going to go into council and committee portion of the meeting, and all recommendations from the standing committees are recommendations to council and are pending the approval of council at a subsequent meeting. So with that, we'll move into operations, roads and waste management with Chair Bromwich.
Thank you, through you, Chair. You have in front of you a report from Hillary Kuczkowski on Public Works Capital Projects update. It is to be received as information, but I'm wondering if Hillary is available to go through this. Just to update us on it. You all have a copy of it. It's the only item on the agenda for my department here. I don't see.
Staff might need a minute because they were all in council chambers, and I'm assuming my door is shut, but I'm assuming that everybody's gone back to their own offices now. So it might take
Right on.
Hillary a minute
Okay,
to
I'll
log
sit.
in.
We'll
Mic
wait.
is on.
That's
Yep.
fine. Thank you. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I just got Hillary's report here on what you fellows have done, just background information for updates. So do you have the report? Do you want to cover it with us, or?
Sure can, yep.
Thank you.
So we'll start at the top here. The tender for our plow truck finally came in. It was a little bit slowed down due to COVID, obviously with them. They had some issues with parts and whatnot, but it has been received and is in service, which is a good thing. Everything went over smoothly with that. A couple update on personnel with the recent retirement of David Galka. We advertised for replacement labor, and successfully candidate through the interview process was Chris Yandinal. His start date was January the 11th, 2021. So that's a good thing. Bark Lake Waste Site, ongoing COVID concerns, obviously with everyone else. We have a project in place where we're using a trial run with the use of a debit machine at the Bark Lake Waste Site. So hopefully to lessen some contact with usage of cash, especially for the C&D stuff, of course. So we're still in the early stages of that. Haven't really heard a whole lot on how it's going, but so far so good. Ohio Road street lights, 2 street lights for Ohio Road were installed, and as far as I know, yes, Wednesday, January 25th, they were powered up, so they're in works there. Towards the public works portion of the report, public works staff about 26 times so far in 2021 for plowing, sanding, salting. Haven't had the huge snowfalls we've had before, but still with the winter, you got to keep up on the sanding and salting, obviously. So hasn't been a good winter so far, but we've still been out quite a bit. Snow removal in town, we've had a couple of events. We've also, due to our low snow conditions this year, we've been working with snowmobile clubs in town here quite a bit here, trying to haul some snow around town and then build trails through town to help them, and then also help protect our assets too, keep them off our asphalt and whatnot. So we've done some pretty big snow hauls there and built some nice trails. If you're down along Lakeshore, you can see we did it there and through town, so that's good. And then in our spare time here between snowfalls, we've been doing some dangerous tree removal and cleaning up at the Wadsworth and Hopefield beaches. All the trees there seem to have kind of died on us over the last year, so getting them taken down and cleaned up. So you always want to do that during the winter so that the asphalt, if you have to drop a tree on the asphalt, it doesn't break it up. So we've been doing that in the midst. And yeah, so that's it for that report.
Thank you very much, Mike. I just want to mention the roads are in great shape all winter. We've had an exceptional winter, and thank you and to the lads for doing it for us. And thank you. It's just a recommendation to receive this as information. So is there any questions from council on this? I see none. I'll pass this back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Councillor Bromwich, there's a second piece. There's a piece of correspondence.
Oh, slap me in the face.
I
We
think
have
there's
a-
a question as well, Chair Bromwich. I think I saw Councillor Poplinski's hand up.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to you, Ernie, please.
Yeah, it was with respect to what the mayor just said about the further item. And under 6.3 unfinished business, I do have a question for Mr. Kuchkowski or two, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a letter here from Carson Trout, Lapine and Greenland Lakes Association, and she has been addressed to Mayor Love, Suzanne Klatt. Would you, either one of you, like to comment on this?
Chair, we put it on the agenda because it relates to roads, and the questions are in regards to roads, so that's why it's here.
Exactly. Well, they're concerned about the salt content on the road, I guess, as far as having a negative environmental impact. They just want us to be aware of how much damage can be done to the lakes. And Wonder if anybody in council would like to respond to this letter. We all have a copy of it. I don't know what to say. I realize we're getting information from these people, which we really respect. To you, Mayor Love, please.
Yeah, what is in the letter, Ms. Woloch does ask if the salt sand mix being applied by the Green and Lake Culvert on Matichesky Road and by Carson Creek, or is it a salt sand mix or is it solely sand? And is brine ever used? I'm wondering if that's something staff could answer for us so that she has an answer to those questions.
Mr. Chair, I do see that the operations manager is on the Zoom now.
Yeah, has brine ever been used, Hillary, on the roads? I don't think so, eh?
Never. In that particular location, we use a sand mixture, which is comprised about 1 to 2.5% of salt, just so the sand doesn't freeze in the box. So our salt use there isn't very much that area.
And does it, do you use sand and salt mixture at every time you do the dusting of the road? I guess you
It's
do,
a
right?
paved road.
Yeah.
It's paved.
I know when I sat in a meeting down at Ogra one year, we had the Toronto representative about salt, and they use like 30% salt on the roads, 30% mix on the roads. And the environmental people said like it's about 20 times too much salt being used on the roads, and it's destroying the infrastructure of Ontario, of the Toronto bridges and culverts, pavement. I know we have a safety issue here with the sand to keep it from freezing, I believe, down at the point of loading. And without using salt with that sand, I don't think we would be able to even use that pile of sand, could we? It's very dangerous for the loading of the trucks. So that's one of the reasons we use salt in that sand, to keep it from freezing completely. We get back to the dome again, where a dome would be a perfect safety solution for this, but we're a long way from that point. So all I can say to these people that we try to minimize the amount of salt used on the roads. I know my road out here, very, very seldom do I see salt damage. So the trees on the side of the road are all good. I don't know what else to say. It's a safety issue, and I don't know if we can get away from it or not.
If I may, Mr. Chair, it's Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Just wanted to add as well that I did forward the letter to Mr. Perkins at the County of Brentford this morning to ask if he could provide in writing the details as to their salting practices on the specific areas that are pertaining to the county. And to that point, I think if our operations manager also sends what our practice is, I think is what Mrs. Woloch was looking for.
Exactly. To you, Mayor Love.
Thank you, Chair. So if our operations manager could respond to Ms. Woloch and just identify what we do use on the road she's identified that are Madawaska Valley, that would be great. I would like to just bring council's attention to page 31 of the package. It is one of the charts that she's provided. At the very bottom, there's a star. Under Kaministiquia, there's a star, and at the very bottom it says Kaministiquia fell into more than one category due to its size and different stations. North Basin has higher values, presumably due to the waste treatment plant. Could we please contact Aqua and find out whether chloride levels are tested in the water discharged from the wastewater treatment plant? Because I would not want to presume that it was a source of chloride in the North Basin. If testing is done, has there been any increase in the chloride levels in recent years? I'd like to know those two things and have that response also go back to Ms. Woloch so that we can clarify if it is not a factor in what the testing results in the North Basin. I'd like to know that, or if it is, I'd also like to know that. Thank you.
So noted, Madam Mayor. I'll put that as an action item.
This is just direction to staff. We don't need a resolution on this. To you,
No, that's
Mark.
fine, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
It's just a bit of a follow-up on that and am I on?
Yep, you're on.
Oh, yeah, just a bit of a follow-up and a comment. I think first of all, when I look at this, it's also really good news. When you look at the chlorine levels in our local lakes, you know, they're very, very low. And it's great to see. And even Kaministiquia, where we do have the higher rate in the North Basin, what it's falling into is a category of 5 to 10 milligrams per liter. Our other lakes like Carson and Trout Lake are in that range anyway. I guess the other portion of Kaministiquia is in the 1 to 5 milligrams. So they're all very, very low, which is fantastic for the quality of our lakes. Just to give an example, Wendy has on her chart identified the 120 milligrams per liter as the threshold. So our lakes are very low, but and that's good to see. And but I think this is a good letter to bring forward, and it seems like we're doing as much as we can to eliminate it. We're not using brine, we're not using pure salt, we're using a reasonable sand salt mixture. So I think it's good news.
I think it is too. Thank you very much, Mark. Any other comments from council or staff? If not, to you, Mayor, or to you, David Schulis.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the Lake Association. I think this is very, very important when we get, even comments from that group. We need to protect our lakes and and our rivers and streams and so on. And I do appreciate any kind of letters that come here, because we do have to keep our asset, definitely safe. So I really do appreciate this letter from that association. And again, thank you very much for, keeping us aware of things to keep our waterways safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Schulis. Any further comments? If not, should I pass this back to you, Chair? Or is there one more? Ernie? Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just want to direct a question to Mr. Kuchkowski. And Hillary, I'm just wondering if you could give us an update on the goings on regarding the property switching there and survey and land issues on the Ohio Road. We've had an action item on that for the last several years. I'm just wondering if you could give us an update.
Through you, Chair, the resident one at the start of Ohio Road. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very faint, but I can hear you.
Okay, I'll try this. Well, I know what's wrong. Okay, so the first transaction, the lawyers have contacted me, and I told them to begin crafting a bylaw. It should be coming soon, the first transaction. They're fully aware of the survey is deposited, so I'm waiting for the lawyers to conduct that through a bylaw. That's coming. About a week and a half ago, I had a conversation with them. The second one, I spoke to the present surveyor, and he's having some issues, personal issues, and he's going to speak to us shortly. He wants to hold a meeting with the supervisor, myself, and Silas with his portfolio and forthcoming surveys to get advanced. So I'm waiting for that meeting to happen. That's the last I heard of. Clear?
Okay, so basically, what's your plan of action? Are we just going to sit and wait for them again? This has been going on for how long now?
Well, I can repeat it again.
This is what I heard a month and two ago, and it's still continuing. So are we going to take the initiative to get this moving, please?
So I don't know what to tell you. but I will repeat it. It's going, the lawyers were communicated to advance a bylaw for the transaction of the first property. And the second one, I spoke to the surveyor and he's having some issues, and we're going to hold the meeting shortly if we should get another surveyor in place.
If I may, through the chair, I'll put down an action item that we follow through to them, maybe in writing, Hillary, so they can give us a better timeline, not just, we'll just follow up with them to see what the holdup is.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Any further comments on this? I don't see any. Then I'll pass this back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bromwich. Our next section, we actually don't have anything in operations, water, wastewater, and facilities. Chair, did you wish to speak to anything? Because we don't have anything on the agenda, but I'll maybe just check with the chair, Chair Schulist.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, everything is under control in my committee. Absolutely. I have nothing to add. Let's continue.
Okay, thank you. Then our next committee is Fire and Protection and Emergency Management, and I'll turn it over to Chair Poplinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, is Chief Quad with us this morning?
He's not in the waiting room. Can you give me a minute and I'll see where if he's available?
If I may, while we wait, just wanted to advise the tabled items that we need clarification on, as well as we wanted to bring forward the final draft. We'll be having a sit down with the chair as well as the deputy chiefs and Chief Quad to make sure that the last draft that comes up would be the one that we then be moving forward. So if you did have any input, if you wanted to send them to Chief Quad and copy me, that would be great. Oh, I see that Chief Quad is connecting now.
Good morning, Chief.
Morning, Chair Poplinski. Morning, Council.
So we're all set to roll, are we?
I'm all set to roll.
The items 8.1 in the municipal reports, pages 33 to 36 in your package, dealing with the closing of the Ontario Fire College. And just wondering if you could speak on that topic, Chief?
Okay, we had a meeting there. One second, I'll tell you what date it was. The fire marshal called us up, so we had a surprise meeting. It was on the 12th of January. They get the notice on the 13th. They called us on the 12th of January, told us the Ontario Fire College was going to close permanently as of March 31st. They had never, ever given any inkling to any fire chief or any municipal council they were planning on doing this. So that was a complete shock to us. So we asked a few questions, such as what we're going to do for training, like to get proper certification if they're looking for it, or for firefighters want certification. They said that was still up in the air. It'd be regional training centers. But as we stated, that's going to be quite an additional cost just for the course alone. Because right now, if we're to go to the fire college, it costs $65 per section per course. And as I laid out in the one sheet here, to go to one of the regional fire training colleges here, it's going to cost us $1,380 for the course, plus $1,800 to complete the course for accommodations, which under $65, the accommodations and the whole course per section were covered at the fire college, like we said. So they're going to get back to us to see what kind of, if they're going to subsidize the courses, if they're going to put a cap on the price of the course. So right now, start up in the air. The original, it's confirmed now. Back originally, back in 2018, they wanted us to go to the NFPA standard, which would have cost $18,000 for each firefighter, because, which is in the report. But what happened at that point was they want us to have all brand new bunker gear per firefighter, brand new SCBA per firefighter. So that's what it cost $18,000. They backed off completely on that, even with regional training centers. But it's going to be a substantial increase to train a firefighter for the year going to go that way. And they're talking about going back to standardized training. And that's, they're looking at to figure out, we have a meeting tomorrow. They have 3 or 4 different scenarios or plans on how to do this kind of training. So each firefighter is meeting minimum standards. So that's sort of the way it sits at the moment. It's a lot of information to give you, and sort of off the cuff, because we kind of got caught off guard with this. Like, it was a shock to the whole fire service.
Okay, please continue.
So like I say, right now we have a meeting tomorrow with the Fire Marshal's office and the Ontario Fire Chiefs Association. They're going to provide us more of an update on what's going on. So hopefully after I can be able to provide you something more in March and more concrete answers to what's going on. But at this point, that's what I got.
Okay, yes, Mayor Love.
Thank you, Chair. So I know this, Corey, Chief Quad, this is something that you and I have been working on for a while, the issues with the changes that are proposed and were actually regulated and then withdrawn. In 2018, the Renfrew County Fire Chiefs Association recommended that certification, which was firefighter certification, be changed to allow the training and testing to be completed within the community by the trained member of each department. And they wanted the Ontario Fire Marshal to ensure timely access to free online training and testing for all departments. This was in response to this position that was taken that firefighter certification would be required for all volunteer firefighters. Municipalities in 2018 responded to the concerns expressed by their fire chiefs. Mayor Donoghue of Edmundston and Bromley and I had a very successful delegation with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services about the impact that firefighter certification would have on volunteer fire departments. Now, at that time, Chief, as you mentioned, you identified to me that it would cost a minimum of about $18,800 each to send a volunteer firefighter away to the Ontario Fire College, because they would be required to complete 400 hours of training for the certification. So Madawaska Valley is one of the municipalities that told the ministry very clearly that this simply wasn't affordable and that it would make firefighter recruitment and retention nearly impossible. So we did that at that time, and the regulation requiring firefighter certification was withdrawn by the province shortly afterwards. It's very clear that firefighter certification, though, is something that's creeping back. It's coming back at us. This is still a priority with the province. We may not be there 100% yet, but it's coming. And I think, Chief, you and I have had conversations and recognize that we see this is coming forward. It's certainly not a case that we don't want to see our firefighters well trained and ready to perform the services they provide our community. We do want them well trained, but Madawaska Valley has already determined that we can't afford firefighter certification training at the Ontario Fire College in Gravenhurst. We've looked at those numbers, we couldn't afford it. So if this is coming back, which we do feel it is, we took the position with the ministry at the time that volunteer firefighter training needs to happen close to home. So I notice in your report, Chief, that you refer to regional training centers and the possibility of a regional training center being set up in Renfrew County, and that there are some assets that could be used at CNL to create that regional training center. To me, this is super important that now our push is that, yes, we do want regional training and we want it here. and it needs to be affordable, and we want it properly subsidized, because the price that you've quoted in your report for taking a course at the Ontario Fire College is obviously subsidized. So that needs to continue, but in order to get our firefighters trained and potentially certified in the future to the level that the province is looking for, it is super important that we are making this as easy as possible for our volunteers to acquire that training, and as cost effective as possible for the municipality to provide it. So in reading this, I think, as you mentioned, Chief, there's a lot more cost involved than just the $65 at the Ontario Fire College, and we've already identified that for the kind of training that the province is pushing for. I'd really like council to be in support of this idea that our training needs to happen close to home. It needs to be convenient to our volunteers, because that's what's going to keep them wanting to be volunteer firefighters and wanting to upgrade their skills. We need to make this work for them. We really have to have a system in place to train them that meets the needs of the volunteer firefighter. It can't be just a system that would work for a professional firefighter. So I'm really keen to go forward from this announcement, which obviously was a shock, and press for that regional training in Renfrew County being provided and subsidized by the province in order to ensure our firefighters get the training they need in the way that works for them. So those are my comments on this at this point in time. I'm wondering if council concurs with that kind of position. Thank you.
Any other comments from any of the council members? Yes, Councillor Wilmer. You had your hand up there.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Blinsky. No, I just wanted to say I do agree with what the mayor's saying. I think one of the things to me is obviously the college rates are completely subsidized, and that form of subsidy should still be going forward wherever the fire training takes place. Even if we didn't have a local one, it shouldn't be jumping up as high as it does at the other regional centers. But I think ideally what the mayor is saying makes absolute sense, in that we need to, it would be a great plus for us to have a local area where they could be trained, and it fits the regional model. And if we could do it at a reasonable subsidized cost, which is no different than was happening before, other than just it would be a regional situation rather than a central or type of approach. So I certainly agree with what the mayor is saying.
Yeah, one of the things we have to realize is that it's not just the initial cost of the new firefighters, but an ongoing every 2 years or for the recertification and so on. So it's all the more reason we should have something local. And I'm just wondering, the chief has mentioned that he's meeting with other concerned chiefs. I understand that's going to happen very soon. Is that, Chief?
That's correct. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we have Eastern
Well, that's
Ontario
pretty
has
soon.
all their chiefs to be meeting.
I'm just wondering if you could report back to us, and this letter, which I was reading this morning, that the mayor had written back in 2018, excellent letter, and we're going to have to write another one with the same conviction and stick to our position that we cannot spend $18,000 for each fire person, and they're volunteers. There's nothing that says that they're going to stay. They can move on to other departments, maybe a position where they get full-time employment. Well, you can't blame them for that. But a little township like ours simply cannot afford what they're suggesting. So I would, that's what I would suggest, if we could get your report in as soon as possible, Chief, and then we'll speak to council and move on and see what we can get done. But we just simply can't accept it as it stands right now.
I agree 100%.
Any other comments from anyone else? Yes, Councillor Bromwich?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm wondering if it would be advantageous for us as a council to put a resolution together, similar to some of the other municipalities, to address this issue to the Ontario government, to the Firefighter Association, and copying in other townships to get their backing on this, unless we've already done this before. A resolution would be a good start so that we are making our point very clear. Do you, yeah.
Yes, Mayor Love, maybe this will be an answer to your point, Mr. Bromwich.
Okay, so I think at this point, we don't have enough information to write a compelling resolution. Whatever the chief is going to bring back to us from his meeting tomorrow, we need to hear what that information is. I think if we can send with our chief the clear message that what we're looking for as rural municipalities is training for our volunteers that is close to home, that is affordable. That's the key thing to send out with our fire chief into that meeting and see what comes back. I'd be very curious to see what comes back. Now, council didn't get a copy of this, but this is the document. This is the minister's brief. It is a very substantive brief that I wrote in response to the regulation of firefighter certification to explain very clearly to the province that it's a miracle to begin with, that based on our population statistics, that we have enough volunteer firefighters to have a fire department. Because when in taking a deep dive into our census data showed me that we actually don't have a lot of people in our community in the age group that is the good age group for volunteer firefighters. That's not the majority of our population. We're heavily weighted towards seniors. So the fact that we have a volunteer fire department, that they're dedicated, this is a miracle. It is a wonderful thing. And if the province is going to impose regulations on our volunteer firefighters, they have to recognize this is going to have a huge impact on recruitment and retention. Because these are young men and women who are of the age where they have families, they have jobs, they have other commitments for their time, and they're willing to give of themselves to their community to provide this service to their neighbors, to all of us. So this was an important factor in getting the province to recognize that whatever they're doing has to fit into this demographics lifestyle. We can't be asking them to go and train for 400 hours because they don't have the 400 hours to give. So when we are looking at this and we are looking at the fact that this is swinging back towards firefighter certification again, we have to take the steps now to push for something that comes back that is still possible for our volunteer firefighters, that they can fit into their lifestyles and be able to achieve the training that's going to be required of them, because those requirements are increasing. They're not decreasing over time. We are now moving away from the facilitator trainer model that has served us very well. Do not get me wrong, has served our departments very well from its implementation. I can't remember if it was 10, 15 years ago or even longer. We're moving away from that. That's where the province is headed, to this requirement for specific training. So again, I'm strongly stressing to council the need to make sure this works for our volunteers is our super important need, because without them, we don't have an expense for a fire department. Our secondary concern then is cost, because our taxpayers can't afford the kind of costs that we were seeing with the first presentation of the requirement for firefighter certification. So I know I've been very wordy on this, but I'm very passionate about this, having been a volunteer firefighter's wife for quite a long period of time. I totally recognize that what these men and women give to our community, and I want to support them to the best of our ability to get them what they need. Chief, how are you? I know I'm being passionate, but could you maybe speak to this? How are you feeling about what I'm expressing here?
You're 100% right, Mayor Love. Like our firefighters, we got an excellent crew, men and women here. We're very fortunate. Probably across the province, we have some of the most dedicated firefighters you ever have, and they're highly skilled, they're highly trained. So 100%, yeah, there's ways of getting around, keeping up proper training amongst yourselves in-house and have a regional thing. You're 100% right. And they keep it within costs. So what you said is 100%. Like that's where most of the chiefs I've spoken to, it was just phone calls from department to department in the last couple of weeks. They're in support of what you say also. We have the bones here, we got the trainers here. Why not work it ourselves and allow us to do it properly? We can show by paper saying they did pass the test and they keep it within reasonable amounts. Like we said, we got the building, there's a large new fires hall in Pembroke. They've offered up the classroom to us. Our employers offered up their classroom. They say ACL is trying to get the college, like let the federal government allow, hopefully let the province allow that as a certified thing. But if it doesn't, we do got the pieces here of the puzzle put together if they allow us to do it. That's what we're hoping for. And you're 100% right. And they keep it within the cost and keep the firefighters local. They can do it on their schedule. So you're 100% right on everything.
Okay, any other comments from council? So if we could wait then until after tomorrow. And I think that would be very, very important to do so. And then we'll proceed if we can on that basis. If the committee agrees with that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, sorry, I know my video is not working. I'd like to recommend as well that council consider tabling resolution on in your agenda. It's 12.3.1. It was from the Township of Augusta in regards to the Ontario Fire College. And if we could table that one until we receive more information.
Okay, thank you, Madam CAO. Okay, so if there's no further comments, we'll move on and to 8.13, and we're asking also if we can table this this item. We can move on to 8.14, which is the call breakdown. Chief, if you want to speak on that matter.
Okay, so far this is a fire call breakdown. Since I've given this report, we've had 3 more chimney fires, which is getting to be quite a problem so far for January this year with the weather, mild weather and cold weather. Last year we had a total of 3 chimney fires in total for the entire township. We've had 4 as of January so far this year. So that's the only real issue we had. And we had 1 gas leak where a propane line broke off in somebody's house and emitted propane in there. So it's been started off to be a fairly busy year for us with the fire department.
Just got a point on that matter before it escapes me, Chief. Now with the COVID, and I know the department's been very good at proacting and getting out and doing inspections and prevention of fires. How are you able to cope? And I'm wondering, should we be putting something up on the net, warning people? You know, because I think they're used to having people coming around and doing inspections, and if we're not able to do that, then how are we reaching out? Because we want to make sure that everybody's safe in their homes.
I was approached by the local paper to put an ad in, so as of tomorrow, like a story to explain to explain how to clean the chimney, when it should be cleaned. They approached me last week after hearing about the fire calls we have. I've also, Gwen's approached me yesterday. I will send her a release, same as I did to the local media, and she will put it on her site on the newsletter. Also explain the dangers of not cleaning your chimney and what replacement smoke alarms and everything else, so we don't have any serious incidents, like as bad enough as it is. But Gwen's approached me also on that, so that will be up here shortly once I give it to her.
Okay, so that's good to hear that you're doing that. Any other comments on that particular subject? Everybody fine with that? We're doing what we can under the conditions. Yes, Mayor Love?
I think that, Chair, you bring up a very important point. With COVID, we have a lot of people in our community who have come back to their cottages and are staying here
Yes.
and don't normally reside
okay.
here through the winter. So any educational assistance through our social media that we can provide to individuals who wouldn't normally be engaged with dealing with wood stoves, dealing with maybe their heating system it isn't used to handling the strain of heating through the winter. It's something for spring and fall. I think anything we can do to assist those people in understanding safety matters that they may need to be aware of is hugely important, because our community at the moment is much larger than it normally is. So Chief, I certainly commend you for providing any sort of safety education material that you are looking to provide out to the community, because it's really needed at this point in time. And I think at an earlier meeting, we did also mention about emergency management, and we're seeing a similar situation where if the hydro goes out for a day or a day and a half or 2 days, most of us who live here are used to dealing with it, but we have people in our community who haven't experienced this. So perhaps a little bit of emergency management promotion, explaining about needing to be prepared to spend 72 hours in your home, to have the water and the food to deal with it without being without hydro, could also be joined with the fire prevention and safety information. And getting that out to our community is hopefully going to mean that we're getting less calls when there are short periods of time when hydro is off, or we're getting less calls because people aren't having chimney fires because they didn't understand how to properly operate a system where they're wood burning. So I think this is great stuff. And if we could combine those and get more information out there, I think that would be good for the population. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Love. Any other comments from the committee? Okay, we'll move on. And the items 8.15 is the emergency management. And Chief, is there any comments that you'd like to make in regard to that particular item?
I'll just give you sort of an update on what's going on. We, the emergency control group for the township has met on January 11th and January 15th to discuss the provincial lockdown order.
Excuse me a moment, Chief. I'm just wondering, I'm having from this end this morning, and I jacked my volume up, but I'm having great difficulty in hearing. I have great difficulty hearing the other presenter earlier on. And I'm just wondering if I could get you to just speak up a little bit.
Okay. On January 11th and January 15th, the emergency control group for the municipality had met to discuss the provincial lockdown and the impacts on the township that we're having. So we started to discuss that. What the information we had, we tried to funnel all the information into one source, which is Gwen, which is our information officer for the municipality, so everybody getting little bits and pieces. So during the conversation we had, we come up with a plan to send all the information to her, so we give the same message to everybody across the whole entire community. On the 15th, right before our emergency management, emergency control group meeting, Gwen and myself met via computer video chat with the rest of the Renfrew County emergency control groups, try and get information on from the health unit to what the plans are. The information was very vague. We haven't got nothing for the rollout of vaccinations throughout the county. They just told us it's going to happen. They didn't give us any details of how, when, or where. We are trying to get that information through a control group all the time. So that came up during that conversation. Every Tuesday and Friday, the province will have a webinar in which to give us updates on provincial regulations, provincial rollouts of vaccination, provincial stats on how the COVID's going, where they're going up with that. Gwen and I usually listen on that. That's at 3:15 on Mondays and Tuesdays and Friday afternoons. I have attached a new municipal control group for the council to approve for the year. The members are on that sheet. It's on let's see what page here. Last page 3 on that municipal emergency control group list is Mayor Love, Suzanne Clant, CEO Clerk, Corbin Quad, CMC, Fire Chief, Gwen Dabrowski, CMC alternate, communications coordinator, Hillary Kachakowski, operations manager, and Amanda Hutter as the treasurer. That's emergency control group to discuss any kind of emergency situation before we have to go to a bigger thing. If we have to declare or anything, we can discuss come up with our emergency plan. And in November, we got a new field officer that replaced Philippe Jeffrey. Her name is Maya Foster. She started in Ottawa then. She's been working well with us since. Worked on her compliance. She's working closely. She gives a lot of information about the COVID updates. She's great to deal with. You call her, she gets back to you within an hour at the very most via email or phone. So, and she's looking forward to actually coming to council when this actually ends to meet everybody in person, see how it was going and have any questions. But she's a very approachable, very knowledgeable person. So far, she's been excellent. So we're good to step in the right direction on that for everybody.
Okay, any, yes, Mayor Love, or would you care to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Chief Quad and other staff, has the Renfrew County District Health Unit contacted us about possible municipal facilities to use as vaccination sites?
We haven't heard a thing yet at all. And there's been absolutely nothing since our last control group meeting.
Could I then follow up, Chair? Okay.
Yes, please.
So I think rather than sit and wait to see if they're going to contact us, we need to contact them, because we know we have a pending construction project at our arena on the ice surface. Dr. Cushman, the acting medical officer of health, came to County Council this month and told us that the health unit was working on regional plans for vaccination centers. Regional meaning taking the entire district and dividing it up into areas. Sorry. Apologize. To areas where they would have a vaccination site. Now, logically looking at the county of Renfrew, an area that includes South Algonquin, in all likelihood, Madawaska Valley, Barry's Bay would be one of the key sites they're presuming they will be able to use. And that would mean, in all likelihood, the ice surface of our arena. I know I've seen plans from other municipalities online where they're planning to do vaccination at their arena and they're laying out the ice surface. So we need to contact them and talk to them about what their expectations are, because they're not contacting us. So let's get a hold of them and let them know what we have going, let them know what we have available in terms of facilities to assist with vaccination, because I really want to ensure that there is a vaccination center in our community available to our population. I wouldn't want to have there be an issue because our arena was under construction when the vaccine finally comes in. Dr. Cushman spoke about there's a real shortage of vaccine right now, where they're struggling to get our long-term care homes vaccinated. Council may not be aware, but Valley Manor has had their first vaccinations, which is great news for our community. Our seniors have that protection, that layer of protection has begun. But what they're looking at, because of the shortages now, is that the vaccine will probably come in sort of a tsunami in May. So if council thinks about our general plans in terms of the arena, we were looking at being in construction over the summer months. That's why I'm saying this is super important, that staff get in touch with them. There may be alternative ways we can set this up in our community, perhaps using the upstairs lounge. I just think that if they're not talking to us, let's talk to them, because they need to be aware. It's not, don't just assume because we have an arena, it's going to be available, because we have other irons in the fire and other things going on. So I'm just asking, could some member of staff take responsibility for getting in touch with the health unit and starting that conversation? Because hopefully we'll still have a vaccination center in our community and we can figure out how to accommodate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Love. No, I think we can put that on the list. Corey, when you're in touch with the folks or anybody else that work in that interest, will be able to get the word out. And also, it would be nice if we knew in a timely fashion we had enough notice to when to sort of anticipate it. we're hearing a whole lot of different stories right now. And until we get talking with them, and I'm sure I would encourage that and certainly bring that information back as soon as possible when you can get it. Any other comments from any other council members on this particular item? Okay, I guess we can move on then to the last item on for the chief, and it's 8.16 and it's 6, and it's the breakdown of the bylaw, enforcement, etc. So Chief, if you could speak to that.
Okay, so far in January, we've had 2 disposing illegally of garbage complaints. We had 3 parking complaints due to snow removal and 1 landlord-tenant complaint. The landlord-tenant complaint has been resolved, so that was taken care of fairly quickly. The landlord and I had sort of a little bit of discussion. We have gotten sort of resolved, so he's in compliance. There was 3 parking tickets handed out for the snow removal because they've been parked there numerous times with numerous warnings this year. So after that many times for the public works, they called me for the last time. So after the second warning, I gave a ticket to each one of those people. They're right in the middle of the village of Barry's Bay. And the garbage complaints, we picked up somebody depositing garbage behind the Polly J. Yakubuski Center. There's 2 bags of garbage off there. We don't know who that was, but there's another spot in the township in which we caught the person red-handed, and they were charged for dumping off 3 bags of garbage and 6 cardboard boxes, but they were caught and charged because we did have them and identified them. And the person did pay the fine immediately and admitted to their guilt.
Okay. Okay, is that it?
That's all we have on the bylaw side.
Okay, any questions or comments by council? Okay, I don't see anybody's hand up. So I think thank you, Chief. So on our agenda, is there any further, there's no correspondence, any unfinished business? Don't see any hands up. So I will thank you for your participation. I'll hand the gavel back to the mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Paflinski. Our next section is Recreation and Community Development Committee, and I'll turn it over to Chair Wilmer.
Thank you, Mayor Love. We have 3 reports today. Is Stephanie here, first of all? I think so.
Stephanie's here.
Good. Okay, so the first one is the report on the emergency generators for the PJYCC and the municipal office. Oh, we've got the information in front of us, but Stephanie, perhaps you could go through it for us.
So if you want to just take a quick look through, I wanted to include the inspections that came back from both the generators. And these were the 10-year inspections that were required to be completed. So they are in your package. The report just says that with the inspections was also a quote provided to have the repair work done. I feel like I'm at a point in this project where I need some assistance from another department because I don't have the expertise to be able to determine whether or not the installation was I would say grandfathered in with all of the requirements that are set forward. So I'm just looking for council direction and looking to say that the repair costs are quite substantial. And also that I wanted to include a semi-annual maintenance contract for consideration. Staff does regularly run the generator over at the PJY and has been keeping up with maintenance, but an annual maintenance contract by a qualified provider is a recommendation from the Ontario Recreation Community. And I'd like to move forward with that as well down the road. So I just wanted to present this to council and get your direction and see where we go from here.
Stephanie, if I may, just when I look at the report, I mean, the generators were installed in 2008. They're still in working condition, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So what I see on the 8 items, when we look at the Yakubuski arena, most of those items all seem to be changes in regulations or something like that. So when I look at it, a lot of them seem to be in 2015 where things changed. So these were properly installed in 2008, but now we're having to deal with all these changes to regulations that have made them non-conforming to at the present time. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Now, that being said, when I contacted and asked more questions, I was told that a lot of the regulations did change in 2016. And that being said, if they were installed to code, which they should have been in 2008 when they were installed, there are different, there could be opportunity within these quotes to say that they are installed correctly, and we may not have to necessarily comply with some of the changes, but I don't have the expertise, and I don't feel my staff has the expertise to go through and figure that out.
Because that is certainly something we would need to know. I mean, whether we can be grandfathered on some of these items, but certainly we need to know that, because these are significant costs on generators that should last far, far longer than 12 years. So, Mayor Love, I see you about to put up your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to tackle these one at a time and start with the PJYCC and recognize that it is 13 years old, which is fine, the generator. But Stephanie, is the main issue here, am I understanding this correctly, that we have an in-ground oil tank with this generator currently? Is that correct?
That's my understanding, correct.
So a lot of these costs are to not have an in-ground oil tank. We would be replacing it with an above-ground oil tank. So, I totally agree with what the chair has said about when they were installed correctly. But as a municipality, we do have to recognize that anytime you have an in-ground tank containing oil, gas, any of those substances, as it ages, it becomes an issue. Is it leaking? Then it can eventually lead to an environmental issue that could cost us a significant amount of money. So I think addressing the in-ground tank and updating everything related to that tank is a reasonable thing to do to protect us from environmental issues down the road. If you can see it above ground, you can tell if it's leaking. You can see if there's problems with it. So to me, that one, yes, we do need to know if it's grandfathered. We also need to know, is this the one, Stephanie, that is American, is not a Canadian approved? We need to know if that's acceptable. If the generator being not, I don't know what the designation is for safety, but not having that designation, can it still be grandfathered? Council needs to know that before we invest, but in the end, we would probably have to invest in bringing this oil tank above ground. When I look at the other one, the municipal office one, now we're talking about a generator that's 17 years old. Spending $26,000 on a generator that itself is 17 years old is a questionable activity. There's no guarantee how long it's going to last. We still don't know if it would be grandfathered or not. But what I'd like to talk about with it, one of the things that was really brought home to me in what Stephanie provided is there's a photograph of this generator. And you're looking down beside the municipal office, and you have the sidewall of the office and the generator and the fence and the house next door. Now, prior to the fire, the house next door was a lot further away. The house next door is a lot closer. I will remind members of council, and I think it might have been the previous council, there was a summer when the hydro went off and we had a council meeting. It was hot. We had the windows open. The generator was running. We all that evening suffered carbon monoxide ingestion. I know I left that meeting feeling quite ill. Didn't really recognize what it was at the time. We did shut the windows eventually, but in that confined space where this generator is currently placed, right under areas where we have windows, and right now beside a house that has windows that could be bedroom windows. This is not a good location for this generator. So when I look at the fact that it's 17 years old, the location now is not great. The connections in the oil tank need some upgrading, obviously, and many other things. I'm wondering if, rather than being so concerned with that one and grandfathering it, do we need to look at a new one, and do we need to look at a different installation location? So I put that on the table for council's consideration, noting that it's a 200 kilowatt generator as opposed to the one at the arena, which is a 300. No, it's a 20 kilowatt generator, sorry, and the arena one is a 300 kilowatt generator. Surely to goodness, the price of a 20 kilowatt generator can't be the astronomical amount that we've heard to replace the one at the arena. So again, if I don't know if it's grandfathered or not, how do I make a decision today? If, you know, and then there are so many other factors we need to consider as a council with each of these. So I will have said my piece.
And I think those are all good points. And I don't think we can make a decision without a lot of information. I have no idea how much a 20 whatever generator costs brand new these days. I mean, we're looking at spending 26,000 to repair, but what's the cost of a new one? I don't know. So anyway, so I think you're right, Mayor Love, we need far more information. I think Stephanie's basically asking, I think, for assistance from other staff. Maybe this is something that we need to investigate further. Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you, Chair. I have a 10,000, which is 10 kilowatt, and it was only like $1,500. So I know 20,000 probably at least triple that price. But we should look at going propane instead of oil. You're not dealing with tanks in the ground anymore, relocating it maybe to the back of the municipal office instead of to the side. So I would be in favor of replacing the whole unit with a new one that meets code and relocation. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Mayor Love.
I think what Councillor Bromwich has just said just again opens up the need for more information. In both cases, we need to look at the kind of fuel we're using, the age of the generators, and specifically with the municipal office, location is key. And perhaps there'd be some savings to switching to propane from oil. So there's so many more questions here. And honestly, these are not questions I expect my recreation and community development coordinator to be able to answer, because, you know, no offense, Stephanie, but we are so far beyond the parameters of your job when we start to talk about these sorts of things and finding out whether or not something is grandfathered and meets and complies with the regulations and the rules in Canada. So I do think we have to engage other staff in this who may have a little more expertise and not count solely on Stephanie, because this isn't really her role. If you look at her job description, which I know we will be looking at job descriptions later on today in a little more detail, but I want to make sure that we're not putting this staff person on the spot to make recommendations to us when we're asking for information that goes beyond the parameters of her portfolio and into much more deep and dark territory, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree, Mayor Love, and I think perhaps I wonder if Sue could gather the appropriate staff to sort of make some decisions. I also feel that we've got two very different situations here, and there should be a separate report on each one. The one at the arena is much larger. It's an emergency shelter sized one. It's a different situation. I agree with the township offices. I mean, there are a lot of potential safety issues there. The location is bad. I just can't see spending 26,000 when we probably could get a new one placed in a proper location for, well, I don't know the amount, but I think it would be a bad investment to spend 26,000 on a 17-year-old generator that certainly is in the wrong place. Right, Councillor Bromwich.
Yeah, just a quick one. I just checked the price on a 20 kilowatt natural gas propane generator, and Cummins is a $9,157. So you're talking $10,000 versus $26,000 repair bill. I don't think there's much to discuss. Thank you.
So there we go. So I think we need to get perhaps 2 reports back from staff, and we should bring in the appropriate staff that can get the report together. Perhaps work
if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So yes, I wanted to add that staff has discussed, so we have circulated to the building department as well as the operations manager, and we have included the facilities manager in the discussion when we were doing the inquiries. So I'm not sure if the facilities manager, I see he's joined, Stephanie, if he wanted to comment as to if he has any leads as to where we should be looking for quotes, or if he has any indication as to how he wants us to proceed as it pertains to this generator. So this generator is much more expensive than the other one. If we feel that, is that one worthy of, like, do we know how long this one will last? Maybe that one, because of the expense of that generator, we need to move forward with a repair versus purchasing a new one. So I'm not sure. I don't know if Raymond wanted to comment on that or not.
Well, number one, when the generator was put there and they wanted to put it beside the building, so we decided why not near the hydro pole so we could run the wiring to the generator instead of digging a trench. So that's where it was put. And for the last so many years, it's been ran and checked, and the hydro pole's there, there's a fence around it, nobody has hit it. I can't see what the concern of being in the wrong place. It's out of the parking lot, it's on the side.
No, Raymond, if I could, we're talking about the other generator when we're talking about the one, the municipal office being in the wrong place.
Oh, sorry.
Not the one at the arena.
Oh, I thought you were. Okay,
no, I think the one at the arena, if I may, Raymond, I think the issue there is the requirement for us to change that fuel, that they're wanting to add the other component of the fuel because this one is buried.
But it's not leaking, so why do we have to fix the problem? That's my question. Like, is that government regulations all of a sudden, or?
Well, that's what we're being told, is that it no longer meets code, and it's mainly because we have a buried tank. When it was put in 2008, that was fine, but now I guess it's no longer fine. And I think as Mayor Love said, so we couldn't get it certified right now with that. But I think too, Mayor Love had a good point too, that eventually all buried tanks do start to leak. And when they do, you can end up with serious environmental issues. Raymond.
Can I speak?
Yep.
Yes.
The tank is not buried.
Okay.
The tank's underneath the unit on a cement pad. So if it leaks, we'll notice it right away.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Mayor Love.
Okay, so Raymond, I was just trying to understand why they are insisting on a new tank then, and my trying to understand this report that we received, it seemed to indicate that we were doing something to bring it above ground. But if it's already above ground, it's still, according to the inspection that we've had, it's still for some reason has failed this inspection. And we have, I can't remember if this one had 8 or 9 fails. So we have to address these fails, or they're going to tell us that we can't use this generator. And we do need this generator. We do need it to function. So it's not a, for council, this isn't in any way, do not take this as a criticism of our municipal staff. As Chair Wilmer said, this was, at the time it was installed, it passed its inspection. It's just that out of our control. Regulations and rules have changed, and we have no control over that. They're changed, and now we're failing. So we have to do these changes in order to pass the inspection. So, I mean, please, as staff, don't take this in any way as negative towards staff. I want you to be I want to be very clear about that. It's just the situation we're in is that things have changed. So if it's not in the ground, which was oddly what the report appeared to indicate, it still for some reason is failing to pass the current rules. So it is a concern. We do have to address it.
Raymond?
Well, I heard because it wasn't Canadian made, that's why they're giving us the big runaround. But if we decided to put a tank, like an oil tank, beside it, disconnect the one that's under the generator, could we get away with that?
Well, I think that's what we need to find out. You know,
Yeah, well, I think
we've got these
that's-
8 issues, and they're mainly with the tank. And I think if it's just the fact that it's not Canadian made, I mean, I think we need to look into that and find out what we can do. And I mean, at the same time, we have to bring it up to standards, or we won't be able to use it. But I just question spending $27,000.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna maybe check at the hospital to see where their tank is, because they just got a new one, to see if it's located under the generator like mine. I'd like to know.
All right.
And-
Mayor Love. Sorry, Raymond. Mayor Love.
Okay.
Raymond, when you're checking with the hospital, could you maybe just ask them what it cost? If they
Yes, I
just
will.
got a new tank? Because when I read this quote that we've received, it says supply and install concrete housekeeping pad for new supply tank. Supply and install a 1,500 liter ULC vacuum monitored supply tank. Tank accessories. It's what we're being asked to do for $27,900 is basically put a new tank in. So I would just be curious to know what it cost at the hospital for comparison. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Just as a side note, I believe when we got this quote, we're not actually removing the tank that ours is on. That's why you're seeing a new quote for a new pad. We'd have to be installing this tanks beside the generator. We're not actually getting rid of the tank that we have. We're emptying it and leaving it as it sits on the generator.
Okay. All right. So as I said, I think that we've got 2 very separate issues, the Township Hall one and the arena one, but I think we need far more information on both of them. And we should have a report come back, I think, on each of them with recommendations and looking at really what needs to be done. I think just having Raymond here has sort of shown us, I mean, we don't know sometimes all the information. We were going on the assumption it was underground, it's not. And so again, we need to know all the information and the proper details before we make a decision. All we have right now is a report that's given us 2 very expensive costs to repair them. And I think we need more than that before we can make a decision. Councillor Bromwich?
Yeah, just through your chair, just a quick mention here. I believe all Generac generators are manufactured in the States, and Generac being the most popular. You see them everywhere in Toronto behind these condos, same size, maybe 300,000 watt generators. So I don't even know if we have a Canadian manufacturer. Cummins is made in the States, Generac's made in the States. So I don't know what this fellow did here as far as demanding a Canadian made, CSA approved generator, but I think we should investigate that too. Is there a Canadian manufacturer that makes these? I don't think there is. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Mayor Love.
Thank you, Chair. So can we send back to staff that we need a coordinated effort? As I mentioned, this is not the Recreation and Community Development Coordinator's specialization. and I respect that highly, but we need a team approach to this problem that pulls in other members of staff, including Raymond, yourself, and possibly some staff from the building department that understand a little bit more about some of the codes. I don't know, but we need a team approach to this. I don't want it to be left, you know, as this whole responsibility is left in the lap of our recreation and community development coordinator. I think we need that team approach to coming up with this information for council so we can make a good decision and making a recommendation to us on the information they find. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I agree completely on that. All right, so if there are no other comments, we'll wait for a report back from staff on those two generators. Okay, the next item, 9.12, is the recreation facility update, and this report provided by Stephanie. Stephanie, could you go through it, please?
Sure. I just wanted to send a report to council to just let you guys know what's kind of going on at the outdoor rinks, at the Combermere Hall, the arena, just so that everybody's aware what we have been doing, and send you some pictures and kind of what it is that we've been going through. So the outdoor rinks have been going well. I've heard nothing but good comments on the ice at both surfaces. In relation to the Combermere Hall, in the 2020 budget, we had budgeted for stage lighting, and we were waiting on a delivery of lights. So they finally arrived in 2021. They've all been installed. The arena, we've been working on a lot of policies, procedures and guidelines. The fire plan has been updated. We also did an inventory of the kitchen and the canteen just to get an idea of where we were with all of the items in there. And that came to a head this past spring when we knew we had 2 weddings booked, and we were probably going to be short cutlery. So there's an interest in moving forward with some of those things. I did want to highlight in this update that we have had staff doing some training, and Alan Travinsky successfully completed some courses. And I just wanted to make council aware of the work that's been going on. The other thing was the procedures and checklists. Through the completion of these courses, Alan's been able to give us a good overview and background on what we need to update with regards to our procedures and checklists, and what we can do going forward just to improve our day-to-day processes here at the arena and within our other facilities. The cleaning system, we do have a system now at 3 of our buildings that makes cleaning a lot easier for our staff. And it's basically press a button and the mop bucket fills for you, or the water bottle fills for you at the right dilution for what it is you're trying to do, whether you're cleaning or sanitizing or disinfecting. And then the last thing that we had done was the facility site inspections have been going on for over a year now. And monthly, the buildings that are not used and the ones that are used are undergo regular inspections with a checklist, and that's all tracked. So I just wanted to give council an update on that, as well as include pictures of the Combermere Hall so that you had a better picture of what was going on. So if there's any questions, you can let us know.
All right, are there any questions for Stephanie on the report?
I just had a question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It was more just an inquiry with Raymond. So I wasn't sure, the last I heard, we were going to install, or we had considered installing a timer on the light at the outdoor rink, or we were going to make sure the lights were turned on. So I noticed they weren't on yesterday, so I wasn't sure if that was just, it's not installed yet, or what we were doing with that.
We ordered them, they're coming this week.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so that was just for information, the report. So we'll move on to 9.13, which is the update on the Combermere Golden Years Center. And Stephanie, again, I'll let you go through this one.
Okay, so the Golden Years Center, as everybody was aware, was being inquired as to a possible location for the Madawaska Valley Food Bank. And we'd been working with an engineer to try to kind of get an idea of what the building was holding for us and what we would know or need to know going forward. The building department made us aware that this is a change of use and we needed to make sure that we were going forward in the right direction. So the report basically includes the email contact or the email information from the engineer, as well as the building department's opinion on what the engineer has said. So I just wanted council to be aware of where we are. And just so council is aware as well, we did send the report off to the food bank as well, so they are aware of the situation that we're in. Okay, so I don't really have much to add besides what's on the report itself. It looks like the entire structure needs to be stabilized, not just one side, but both. And so a lot of work done to the floor, the basement, and a lot of other work around the building. So just for council information and just looking for some direction.
And Stephanie, we haven't got cost estimates or anything like that yet, right? We haven't gone that far.
No, well, I reached out to the engineer hoping that he could give me a bit of an idea, and he told me to reach out to a contractor. I spoke with the operations manager, and Hillary wanted to ballpark it somewhere around $50,000. Could be less, but I don't have a quote without actually having a contractor go visit the building.
All right. Are there any comments, questions?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Just wanted to relay the position from the food bank. So they were advised that this would be, this report would be going before council. So what they've stated is that they recognize that the cost to ready the building to move in would be substantial according to that report. So they had expressed a willingness to help with incidental moving costs and minor capital, including they had talked to council about pursuing grants to improve the building. However, following these findings, they're not able to help with that substantial cost that the document indicates. So regardless of what option council chooses, the reason the food bank originally approached the township for help still persists, and it will exist. Their current location makes it difficult for them to serve the community well in the location because it lacks running water and it's small where they're operating out of. So just want to make council aware, and they were very grateful for being kept informed.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? Mayor Love.
Okay, I'm gonna dive into the deep end and wade in on this building. Reading this information is giving me the impression that even with the existing use of the building, we have issues. Even if we don't go to looking at, freezers and weight loads, just dealing with the occupancy of the building that we have had previously, we now know there are structural deficiencies, significant foundation and structural deficiencies with this building. So we as a council have, I think, before us a difficult decision to make in regards to this building. At the present moment, it's surplus to our needs. We understand that. We don't have a specific need for it. A number of uses have been tried, and I think, council had a good idea and hope to help our local food bank by offering this building as a possible site. But clearly that's not going to work without us investing what is sounding like, but we don't have an estimate of, but is sounding like a significant amount of money. So as a council, I think we have as I say, a pretty hard decision to make. We have to decide, do we require as a municipality, do we require this building sufficiently? Do we have a use of it sufficient to invest this kind of taxpayer dollars into it? And if we don't feel we do, then what do we do about it? Do we close it up and leave it there? Do we demolish it and either sell the land it's on, or sell the building and the land in an as is where is condition, or keep the land as additional parking area for the Combermere Recreational Center, because parking is an issue there. Anyone who's been to anything at that center where it's a fairly big event knows that parking is a serious issue. There's not enough of it. So I think we have a lot of difficult and hard choices to make here, but to just have the building sit there costing us money to keep it in stasis, I don't think is the best use of our taxpayers' dollars, especially when there are these significant concerns with it structurally that even mean that potentially we shouldn't be using it as a meeting place. So I know we don't have concrete information, but I think council does need to have a discussion about this building and what value do we see it contributing to our municipality going forward, because that is going to determine whether or not we want to invest this kind of money in it. So I think we do need to have a talk about this in terms of how we see it as valuable, or at this point, perhaps surplus to our needs.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is this something then that staff was directed to bring forward a list of all of our lands and our buildings, and Silas and Gwen have been working at getting some mapping showing what we have, what we use it for, and how much it is. It would give us a little bit more time to assess, what else could be done with the building, and if any council member wishes us to bring anything forward, then we could bring it forward at that time too.
No, I think that would be a good idea, because I really think we have lots of issues with this building that need to be looked at. We don't, given the costs, which we don't know exactly, but we do have some details from staff and from the engineer, and I think given the costs that we will have, the fact that we don't have any core service needs for that building right now, and I mean, it would be nice for the food bank, but as we know, they can't help with the costs on that, and I don't think we can spend that type of money to repair it and then not receive any revenue in return. So I think, yeah, it would be good to add to that list, and let's look at it further. If there are some solutions that come forward, that would be great. But I think, yes, put it on the list right now.
Can I ask council members to send me any potential uses or anything that we can add to the report for consideration?
Yeah, Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think that it's been sitting vacant now, I think, what, around 5 years?
Yes.
5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
And we've received no income from it. It would certainly a nice gesture for us to help out the food bank. But I really don't think that's going to be possible since there's no grants to be able to fix up that building. We can't go to the taxpayers once more. I think it should be considered surplus and considered on the list of other properties that we're considering. And we should also advise the food bank accordingly, because I don't think it's fair to them to be holding them on the line with an expectation that maybe we're going to spend this money and fix it up so they can use it. It's just not possible. So I would support that course of action. So thank you.
Thank you. And I agree also on the food bank. I think we need to make sure they're fully aware so they can start looking at other alternatives. And I think we as a municipality, if we have some solution, I really can't see one myself right now, but we need to move on from this as a solution and again, put it on the list and move forward. All right, are there any other comments? Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you, through you, Chair. 2 councils ago, we had the same issue come up with this building. And it was discussed at the time, there was plumbing problems and that there was no use for the building as it sat. And it would have been sort of suggested go surplus as is, and that would get it off our asset list. It's costing us money to keep it heated over the winter time. It's actually an unsafe building at this point to be occupied. So I would agree with the surplus idea if we could, and it might make it affordable enough for an investor to come in there and renovate it and then make use of it. But I don't think we should saddle our taxpayers with any further costs on this. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing agreement from council, and if Sue, if you could put it on the surplus list and we can move forward with it, that would be terrific. All right, if there are no more comments, I think we have no correspondence and information and no unfinished business. So I will close out the recreation portion and hand the chair back over to Mayor Love.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Poplinski has his hand up. Councillor, is that in relation to recreation?
No, it's in relation to my stomach. I'm getting hungry.
Okay, so we are looking at having, because we have a lawyer from, an HR lawyer as part of our in-camera session, we've got that somewhat scheduled as basically 2 o'clock. So I was hoping to take lunch. I know it's getting a little bit late, but I'd like to take that lunch, before that in-camera session. I'm wondering if council would indulge me to possibly get through planning matters and then we could take lunch. We have, one more significant discussion potentially about the trailer bylaw, and if we could possibly do that, because I noticed that Mr. Larbetsky is here and I know he will probably be wanting to have lunch as well. So could we do that planning section and then we'll break for lunch and be back for 2 to proceed with the in-camera, and then we'll have to complete the rest of our agenda once we're done in camera. Is council okay with that? I'm not seeing anyone objecting. So if we could please just do planning matters and statutory meeting under Planning Act. We have a municipal report, staff update, trailer bylaw, and Sue, I believe this is your report, but I am glad that, did I lose Mr. Larbetsky? Is he still here? Oh, there he is. He's turned his camera on. I apologize. I was looking for a name. So I'm glad that we have him here to speak to this. So Sue, did you want to speak to the report?
Yes, we we were directed as staff to go back and look at some concerns that staff had brought forward about the increasing issues that we're having with trailers, and we're having now a lot of complaints with sea containers. We were having a lot of non-compliance with building without a permit. So we did have a staff meeting, and out of that staff meeting, we wanted to brief you on some of the position of staff to ensure that council either concurs or wishes us to proceed in a different manner. So the trailers, if you have any questions for me, might be the easiest way to vet that. But we did want to speak about the trailer bylaw, that we do agree as staff that we need to be adhering to the zoning bylaw that we have as it pertains to trailers, specifically around the waterway. We did make some recommendations once we do our review of the zoning bylaw after the OPA 31 is passed, of some additions that we think will bring clarity, as including the necessity to have a class 4 septic, the necessity to submit a completed building application prior to the 3-year lapse, include that the trailer would be removed if the 3 years from the installation of the septic has lapsed and no building application has been submitted to the CBO. And in addition, that if there is not sufficient time to complete the project, then a written request to the CBO would be submitted for approval to allow the extension. So instead of adding another policy on top of the policy, staff feels that the references in the zoning bylaw are good, that this would clarify the issue, and they would like to consider that. There had been mention about licensing trailers. Staff hadn't had the time to do a deep dive in it, but they are saying that they'd like to review the logistics versus the benefits and see what it entails to have adherence. And staff would provide then a council with a recommendation to proceed or not to proceed with licensing trailers throughout the municipality. We did include it. You had been provided that information before from our bylaw officer, which was just a Word document that was added with excerpts from different municipalities as to what they are doing and what their zoning bylaw says about trailers. Sea Containers staff will increase the education of the need to obtain a building permit to have sea containers on the property and adhere to the zoning bylaw where it lists that is permitted. But now the issue becomes how many is too many? Do we need to look at the amount of sea containers? And then the other issue that we're having a lot of non-compliance with this summer was sleeping cabins and gazebos. We do, again, always think the first line of defense is education. We need to do a better job at promoting that and advising people the need to obtain a permit and when and what the setbacks and requirements might be. I did include in some of our discussions, we discussed some alternatives, a little bit more out of the box, possibly that other municipalities have used. I included an encroachment agreement. Now it was written in 2006, so I'm sure there's probably some updated ones or something more current. But we just wanted to open the door to look at that, and we think it might be something that would seek efficiencies, and it's giving municipal staff another tool and council another tool, possibly when you have those issues where you're asking somebody to do a zoning bylaw amendment for a foot of a deck that is encroaching on municipal property. So we're not saying we want an encroachment agreement. We wanted to provide advise council that there are other means out there that possibly would save us from coming back to the table for bylaw amendments all the time. So our point of view as staff is if we're coming back to the table 4 times out of 10 with an issue that requires an amendment, it's either that we should be reviewing the zoning bylaw. Do we need to increase or decrease the setbacks, or do we need to look at policy? So I'm not sure if Silas wanted to add anything to that, or if council had any questions.
Silas, maybe how about I'll ask if you have any comments first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Sue described it very well. This is an issue that is increasingly becoming very time consuming for the bylaw enforcement officer and building inspector. The issue of the trailers popping up since COVID, that seems to be a trend. People want to get away from the city. We want to occupy our land that we pay taxes on. That's usually what we hear. But looking at it from the zoning end of things, it is very specific as to where trailers can be located and occupancy of vehicles. And we get the argument that why can't we have more than one trailer? And the planner, Charles Cheeseman, has said trailers are for tourist commercial zone trailer parks. That's the intention of the zoning bylaw. And this has fallen before other councils, and one of the issues or how it came about that there was the 3-year period put on these trailers was that as previously discussed in the development charges presentation, our cottages are now turning into homes. People are moving here, and if they have a trailer that's parked next door on the vacant lot and they want to live there year round, they are starting to approach council and say, we're paying high taxes, and how come these people can use the trailers without paying that high tax that should be paid or shared? I shouldn't say paid, but shared. So that is where the issue of licensing trailers has come about, where as staff, we've discussed that. It is a challenge. We have a large municipality. It would probably take another person to actually go door to door, see how many trailers are there, what will the licensing fee be annually, and then it creates another monster, I would think, for the Treasury Department. How do you track Is there something that goes on to the roll number? We're now getting new software being introduced. Those are all questions that are still out there, and it's a little difficult to give any direct guidance to council as to what decision should be made. So I think probably it's to say, yes, we're working on it, but we haven't come to an actual report with a recommendation to council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council on this at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. I do have one question. If I want to place a trailer on my property and my property is not on a lake, it's in a rural zone, I'm allowed, correct?
Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. That was one of the policy changes that was amended, that if you have a larger piece of property, the only restriction is the fact that you have to have a greater setback from the road so that the trailers don't appear unsightly, if I can use those words. Thank you.
Okay, and now, should I want to do that, do I need a building permit? How is the municipality notified that that trailer's been properly and legally placed on that property? I'm just not sure of the process.
Yes, they would approach the building department, and I think as stipulated, there is the requirement for a proper septic sewage disposal system, so that has to be taken into account. I know that there are maybe the 100-acre parcels where someone just comes and uses a trailer for hunting season, and there may not be the full requirement, or you don't have electricity to that location, so that is something that the septic and building inspector have to determine what's required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that gives me some sense of how we track for trailers that are allowed on specific properties and that they have the right setbacks, etc.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I do
Sure.
believe, I'd have to clarify, but I do believe a previous report from bylaw stated that MPAC, there is no assessment on the trailer. We get assessment on the septic only. And that was part of some of the issues with the trailers as well.
So can we confirm that, please? Because I've sat in MPAC presentations when they told me that, where they told all of us that once a trailer is attached to a permanent fixture of some sort, be it a deck, hydro, septic, well, that it then becomes able to be assessed by MPAC. So I'd really like confirmation of that, certainly, just to have a clear understanding of how assessment works as it relates to trailers, because I know I get a lot of questions about this. I'm sure members of council do as well. The other point I'd just like, oh, Councillor, or sorry, I'm making you a councillor, Silas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Something that just came to my mind as you were speaking about MPAC. One of the other concerns we have is the policing costs. I believe that trailers are targeted for that and they aren't paying the taxes. Thank you.
Yes, they are. They are counted as a household. So we need to be conscious of that and mindful that, which is why I really want to understand how MPAC assesses a property with a trailer on it, because we under our zoning, we do have them allowed in certain zones. So I would like to make certain that we are gaining the revenue to offset that per household costs that we're being charged for OPP from that property, because that's only fair and equitable to the rest of our taxpayers, that we're not tax shifting that cost onto those who have built permanent structures and have homes and businesses. Then one other factor, I think, because staff is still developing this, that I'd like staff to factor in and just consider is the question about tiny homes. Because tiny homes can be things that are fixed in place and small, or they can be things on wheels, very much like being portable. As we move forward, updating our comprehensive zoning bylaw, this is going to be something we're going to be asked about. So I think it's a factor we need to give some thought to in terms of, would it be considered a trailer? would it not, et cetera, and so forth. So I just want to put that note into staff's ear to be thoughtful of tiny homes, because it will be a discussion council will be having. In terms of the encroachment agreement, an encroachment policy, I would suggest to council this may be a very good idea to have a policy in place. Use of the shoreline road allowance by adjacent landowners should be identified. Certainly that it's at own risk, and that there's no obligation on the part of the municipality to ensure the safety of the user. Shoreline road allowance remains in its natural state, and it's in an as is, where is, or as we have seen with spring flooding, it's sometimes in an as was condition. We're not going to take on responsibility for that, but we certainly do have encroachments that have occurred onto unopened road allowances and onto shoreline road allowances, and it would be nice to have a consistent policy in place so that staff know how to address those situations, and you know, that we're all clear on how that's going to be addressed. I know we do have some individual encroachment agreements with various owners from the past, and we would need to also know, how do we address those when they come up for renewal? Would they come under the policy? But it would be nice to have a policy in place so there's clear direction. Any thoughts of council on that? Do we want to see staff investigate an encroachment, either an encroachment policy or a component on encroachment in our, I don't know if it would go in the zoning bylaw, or it would be a policy? Okay, thank you.
Policy.
Okay, do we want them to investigate that? Because we're constantly running into this as well. Okay, I got one nod. Okay, I got two, I've got, yes, okay. Thank you, gentlemen. So maybe if you could just, again, we appreciate the work you're doing on this, because it's becoming a bigger issue every day. Obviously, it's becoming more and more of an issue. And if you could get back to us with some policy on encroachments and what staff is recommending as the potential tweaking and changes to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, that would be very much appreciated, because in the end we want to pass some policy and update our bylaw so that it makes it fair to all and more easy for staff to address, because you've been given clear guidance.
And I wanted to include for council, advise council as well, that it has been an interdepartmental discussion, because it not only affects planning, it's building, the roads department has had issues as well. So we are including many departments in this discussion, and we had previous direction from council to include MPAC in that discussion as well. The tiny homes, we had previous direction as well, that we've noted in our zoning bylaw amendment, that is something that's at the forefront as well. I did want to just quickly mention before we break for lunch, I did include, I know it's kind of odd that I put this in with our trailer review, but I didn't want to lose sight of it. We have had non-compliance with the chicken coop in residential zone within the town limits. So staff is dealing with an order to remove chickens in a residential zone. A letter of compliance has been sent to the ratepayer solicitor, and there has been some discussion between the solicitor and the bylaw. So the request is to review the zoning bylaw to allow chickens within the town limits is the request of the applicant. At this time, staff recommendation is to adhere to the zoning bylaw in areas where chicken or farm animals are permitted. So staff is not recommending a poultry bylaw at this time, but we wanted to make council aware that we have had the request.
Okay, is there any questions or discussion by council on that? No, okay, I'm not seeing any questions or any discussion. So, okay, we'll take this as an update and accept it as information. And thank you, Silas. I hope you've had your lunch, but if you haven't, I apologize for keeping you from it so long.
Madam Mayor, can I ask our deputy clerk, is it easier for us to go into close now and have our lunch? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, normally she would prefer that I do that. So council, I know we're all hungry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the, I've got to find it. I apologize. Give me 1 second. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll enter in camera, we will break for lunch, we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for our in-camera session, and then we will, when we are done that, come back to finish as much of our agenda as we possibly can. Is everyone good with that? Okay, I'm not seeing any no's. So in camera, the recommendation is that the meeting enter in camera session to discuss matters pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations, or employee negotiations. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. A trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organizations. Ontario Municipal Act 2001, Chapter 25, Section 239, 2B, D, F, and I. Number 1 will be the regular council meeting minutes in camera of January 19th, 2021. Number 2, tender 2020-12 Skeed Road, Lakewoods Drive construction. And number 3 will be human resources. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer.